This video is sponsored by Aura. Alright, y'all, we all know that in a world full of spammers and scammers, you got to keep your neck on rotation to avoid frustration from all of these fake warranty calls for cars that you no longer own, if you ever did, or these fugazi insurance pitches that are really just trying to get the last four of your social. And that's not to mention all of the data brokerage sites that already got all of that info. Thanks a lot, Google. Well, that's where today's sponsor, Aura, comes in. Y'all know the drill by now. Aura alerts you when your data has been leaked onto the dark web, as well as putting in requests to those sites to have your information deleted from off of them. On top of that, you get stuff like a VPN, a password manager, and transaction monitoring tools to make sure that nobody is digging into your accounts and using your bucks for something crazy like I don't know, glass dildos or something. So go to my link today, aura.com/Lil Bill for 14 days free on me. Now, not on me. Y'all already know how cheap I am. But again, go to aura.com/Lil Bill or click the link in the description and protect your dog. Just do the right thing, man. It's your money. Use it when you need it. Don't let nobody else do it. That's kind of my point, dog.
Okay, so maybe about a month ago now, King Pan Africa himself, FD Signifier, aka the only black voice on this side of the internet that matters apparently, joined me on stream to discuss, among other topics, of barbershop discourse, Joseph Bad Booty and his ongoing campaign to coax the hip-hop Candyman to come outside and play. If I ain't learned anything else from the discourse around that discourse, is that there's a few points from this beef that have proven to me how much of the party is still ongoing, even after Kendrick declared it dead and called on the culture to start a new one with spades and Kool-Aid squeezes like we had back in ye olden days. The problem is, Kenny ain't really been around to help start it since the Super Bowl. And I mean, I get it, dog. World Tour with SZA and all that. And I'm not saying he won't respond, because I fully believe that he will at some point, even if it's just with a sub. My point was and is that Kenny backing down from a rap beef after taking it upon himself to reset the culture to a time in which beef was one of the culture's definitive traits would be exactly the kind of cognitive dissonance that's low-key kind of dogged him for most of his career, but more importantly in this case, seems to dog many of his fans, many of them who are probably transplants from the Owl House. Let's just be real. And I know what the boogies are going to say. Didn't you listen to Blacker to Berry? He literally called himself a hypocrite on that track. Yeah, and if I shoot a nigga in the head and plead guilty, the judge ain't going to say, oh, well, good on you for apologizing. I guess you don't have to go to prison now, bucko. Again, use your brain, nigga. Like Feek said on that stream, for one reason or another, probably the biggest tangible cultural shift since Not Like Us is that Kendrick, due to no fault of his own, has in some ways taken on shades of Drake, and that a significant portion of his fans either can't, or let's just be real, don't want to process any kind of criticism of him, much less can they process the idea that he could ever be bested in a rap battle by anyone who isn't a top 40 mainstay. And that's kind of what irks me with this whole discourse. I don't know if this faction within the kinfolk has always been there, but didn't become this loud and obnoxious until the head of the snake, the head of the Drake, got cut off, or if this is again largely OV hoes looking for the most popular wave to ride, because we all know that they have no loyalty to anything or anyone but whoever is crowned king for that moment. Either way, like I've said umpteenth thousand times, I'm about as big a fan of Kendrick as a reasonable person can be. Keyword being a reasonable person, or key phrase, I guess, whatever. You get what I'm trying to say. But beyond all of that, before I was a fan of any particular hip hop artist, I was a fan of hip hop first. An old school one at that. The kind that believes that there's no such thing as too small for a clapback. Like I said, if Jay-Z had time between Kingdom Come and American Gangster to give Jim Jones and Max B the time of day, or if 50 could start a whole beef with Jadakiss and Fat Joe for just featuring on a Ja Rule track after Ja had already been handled by 50, I don't want to hear about how Joey Badass is too small for Kendrick. But again, more grating than that take is this idea that Kendrick is unbeatable in a rap battle. This is No, okay, maybe it's a little bit of shade, but the people who think this or the people who get mad when you prove that thought wrong are the antithesis of what hip hop is supposed to be about. Listen, I'll be damned if a nigga named Anime Otaku 69420 is going to tell me that hip hop is all vibes and good times, that competition between rappers are settled on the charts or in subreddits, or that expecting a man who's basically made hip-hop his religion to honor that religion's most blessed sacrament, a verbal combat, is tearing another black man down. Like, nigga, shut up with that. We talking about rap, dog, not the Million Freaking Man March. Come off your high horse and get your thumb out of your behind for a second, and don't smell it when you take it out. Your stuff stinks just like everybody else's. Probably worse, to be honest. I've said before, the lyrical slaughter that was Kenny v. Drake told us more about Drake than it did about Kendrick, specifically that Drake was out of his depth from jump. The myriad of personal skeletons on top of his apparent inability to keep a friendly fade friendly was always going to wind up being his downfall. But what made that battle a massacre was Drake's lack of cultural awareness in regards to his blackness. And anybody who has been around hip hop for long enough to remember burning mixtapes from LimeWire downloads can tell you Kendrick is basically the Akuma of hip hop. Bro hits like a Mack freaking truck with every input, is what I'm saying. To the point that a noob or even an intermediate would be forgiven for putting their controller through the TV screen after one too many ghost shurikens. But if you know what you're doing, he's really a glass cannon. Admittedly, it's a lot easier said than done, but there is one fatal flaw to Kendrick that most people who know better know without me even having to say it, but few people can exploit well enough to win against him. So that's what we're going to get into today: how to beat the boogeyman. And more importantly, who, if anybody, today can do that. More important than that, my hope is by delving into the psychology behind rap battle strategy that y'all will come to at least appreciate why it is such an integral part of the culture and why people like me fell in love with this culture to begin with. So yeah, this is gonna be a long one, dog. Tune up the band, Clarence, and know you're not getting paid extra this month. So first off, we have to reestablish what makes a diss track worthy, because a lot of y'all still seem to have this idea that it's just spamming the dirty laundry button until somebody gets shot or files a lawsuit. I'm not going to pretend like spilling tea hasn't always been an effective haymaker, but sticking with the boxing theme, the best diss battles have been a series of body blows followed by a knockout in like the 11th or 12th round or so. The best example of this is probably the most famous diss battle of all time between Jay and Nas. I'm not going to get into the deep lore because I did that last year, but Takeover and Ether were just each rapper's left hooks after a series of jabs, both subliminal and obvious, over the previous decade. Also, again, keep in mind that Takeover was originally a Mobb Deep diss. It wasn't until Jay heard Ether that he recorded that third verse, which is why it does feel so disjointed from the rest of the track. But even then, Jay didn't resort to crotch shots until he knew he had pretty much already lost. In the culture being what it was back then, Super Ugly was quickly written off as Hov flailing to stay above water, and every other shot following that track was basically ignored. You're seeing a theme here, right? Spilling the tea only works when you're proving a greater point, like the story of Adidon, or I guess Hit 'Em Up, which if you ask me is still the most overgassed diss track of all time in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. Neither Jay or Nas said anything about the other that wasn't already being said in barber chairs or on street corners the country over. But it was the way that they used it to undress their op that made it effective. That's why I still say that Euphoria was the most effective pure diss track between Drake and Kendrick. That and the last verse of Not Like Us and a single bar from Family Matters that's since become a meme, but really should have been the foundation of Drake's counterattack if he were truly tapped in. Like I said on that stream I mentioned, the biggest knock on Kendrick historically has been his, let's call them inconsistencies. The most recent of which being that Playboy Cardi feature after he called Drake an abuser in front of millions of white housewives looking up if it's safe to put their CBD gummies in the cowboy dip to stop their husband from bitching about how he'd rather be watching Morgan Wallen instead of this. But there's the veil shot at famous hack comedian Andrew Scholes a few weeks before popping out with famous women's rights activist Dr. Dre last summer. There's the entire album that he did about cleaning up the culture's dirty laundry while having Kodak Black, probably the best personification of one of the dirtiest shirts in the wash, being one of the only 2 features on that album. And considering all that Yak has been up to since, it just looks even worse in hindsight. There's the infamous "I'm an Israelite, don't call me black no more" line from Ya that he explained away as rapping from his cousin's perspective. This after multiple interviews where he claimed Christianity as his faith of choice to the point of dressing up as literal black Jesus at one point. There's the interview where he Aaron Magrudered his way around the Michael Brown case, saying that black people needed to respect ourselves before we demand the same of anyone else. Kendrick is more contradictory than white Christians is what I'm saying. Or black ones for that matter. Which, now that I think about it, it makes sense that he would call himself one, right? The anti-industry darling who convinced your white dorm mate that he was blacker than you because GKMC taught him about syrup sandwiches. The spiritual successor to Tupac Shakur who won a Pulitzer Prize for fighting the power. And like I said, I've heard all the rebuttals at this point. He's only human. He said he was a hypocrite. I don't listen to Kendrick for his politics. Blah, 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 blah. Shut the Nobody with sense is mistaking Kendrick for Kwame Ture, but it's undeniable that he's not unlike Jay and Bey in that he's commodified the aesthetic of black radicalism for his own end. And that aesthetic is a big part of his appeal. You can't deny that, dog. He's just more honest about it, if you ask me. But that don't make it any less true or exploitable in the context of a rap battle. Understand that when I say Kendrick is a hotep, like I said in the hotep video, because he most definitely is, and I think I've said it other times too. Point is, nigga's a hotep. I'm not talking about the in living color cartoon caricatures that black Twitter vacillates between mocking and making a scapegoat for all things bad and bigoted. I'm talking about the niggas who thought that they were Furious Styles once they learned what gentrification meant. The niggas who unironically use words like phenotype in regular conversation. The niggas who think the cure for cancer is an alkaline only diet and black seed oil capsules. That is who Kendrick Lamar is. The nigga who watched a 15-minute video on Frantz Fanon and based his politics on Goodreads quotes of Wretched of the Earth without actually reading the book. Which I mean is what half of LeftTube does with Marx and Mal, but whatever. Y'all get my point, right? Niggas like that hate when you call them on their BS. And they especially hate it when it's done by somebody who they know knows the deep magic much better than they do. And not only that, they know the spells that they never bothered to learn because the novice level Jones were good enough to impress the uninitiated. If Cole is conscious rap for dummies, the way that one of y'all put so eloquently in one of the past posts, then Kendrick is what deep looks like to the uninitiated. And I think he not only knows but embraces that. That's the caveat though. You can't just call Kendrick on his BS if you don't even understand what his BS is really about. You can't just point out specific inconsistencies because he can always, "I'm a hypocrite," his way out of it, and the stands will get right behind it. It's hard for me to explain it, but the only way to beat Kendrick is with another Kendrick. The best example I can give of this is 50's beef with Jadakiss. Like I said in the past, the reason 50 beat Ja Rule is because he was a better Ja than Ja was. The perfect distillation of street cred and pop appeal is what I'm saying. Jadakiss knew he was never going to turn the pop girlies against 50. He knew that he was never going to win over the casuals, but the heads that knew, that's where his opening was. He even acknowledged this in the opening to Checkmate. But Jada knew that the pop charts wasn't where 50's heart was. Neither was the pop charts where 50's star was molded. 50 was a street hopper initially who just made pop hits until he became less a street rapper than he was a hip hopper with street rapper aesthetics. 50 was the new Ja Rule was Jada's whole argument, and it worked. In a similar vein, Kendrick, even before the beef began to take on elements of Drake, in that his celebrity now drives his branding as much as his artistry. In an ironic twist of fate, it's the boogies that will ultimately be Dot's undoing. In becoming the most celebrated rapper of his generation, Kendrick has become a bona fide pop superstar, and thus his fan base is taking on elements of typical pop star super standom. Whether it's because of his prose, his politics, or if we just gonna be real, his popularity, a lot of these niggas don't actually like rap. They just like Kendrick, who so happens to use rap as his vehicle. That's why when I was putting out feelers for this video, I regularly get goofy like, would you rather we listen to Sexy Red instead? As though Kendrick is the only lyrical rapper in existence, and his own former label mate and Absol isn't one of the greatest lyricists of this past decade. Like, again, nigga, shut the Much like the NBA, hip-hop is marketed around personalities. So then the loudest folk in the room are folk who don't even like the game. They just like to watch their favorite celebrity play it. That's Kendrick's Achilles heel. That in a lot of ways, he is, or at least has become, what he hates most about hip-hop. A pop star. An industry baby even. Again, what was all that for the culture and let the party die talk for if this is what the result was going to be? A lateral move. A rap battle is basically a public trial is what I'm getting at. It doesn't matter if my argument is ironclad. 9 out of 10 times it's not. It only matters that I can convince enough people that the evidence supports me, which is what Jada did to 50. Even if the evidence is on my side, none of that matters without a credible witness. Ja Rule could never do what Jadakiss did. Matter of fact, Ja did try to do what Jadakiss did, but his credibility was already shot at that point, so nobody cared. What I'm saying is you're not going to outstreet Jadakiss. You just have to out-rap him, which 50 Cent was never going to do, dog. So again, with all his own dirt, from his weird relationships with underage girls, to creeping on former exes, to just his general cornball, incelish behavior over the past decade or half decade, whatever, there's nothing Drake really could have said to give himself the moral high ground. Except for that one bar. Kendrick opened his mouth again. Somebody give him a Grammy. Like I said, Kendrick was always the worst possible matchup for Drake because according to old school hardcore hippity hoppers, Drake represented everything wrong with the culture. Kendrick has always been presented and presented himself as the opposite of that. Hip-hop's savior, if you will, or at least the savior of old school, whatever. Y'all know where I'm going. Again, that's not completely true, but like I always say, it's the perception, the narrative that matters most in these types of things. And Drake just wasn't tapped in enough to change the narrative. Like, you could have done a whole track that was basically just that one bar instead of whatever the hell the Heart Part 6 was supposed to be. And you would have at least recovered enough to probably warrant at least one more response from Kendrick. The reason Drake can use that angle in this context is because for all of his many flaws, Drake never presented as anything other than a pop star. I mean, obviously using rap as his vehicle, but this is who he's always been. He's never tried to save hip-hop from commercialism. If anything, he helped accelerate it and did so with gusto. But at least he didn't shy away from that. He did the conscious thing for like, what, a bar or two? But for the most part, he's actively made his art and presentation as apolitical as possible. And this was as good a time as any to capitalize on that. Hey, I wasn't the one who made the most radically black rap album to ever top the Billboard 200 and then accept a myriad of awards from white folks for doing so. That was you, nigga. I was making Hotline Bling, remember? Matter of fact, now that I think about it, for as pitch black as your music is, your audience is beige at best.
I hope she plays Love Song.
This is Kendrick Lamar.
Like, it low-key might be whiter than mine when I think about it. Niggas, and by niggas, I mean niggas, can't even afford to go to one of your concerts anymore because the nosebleeds cost more than a used Cadillac. But I'm the one who can't say nigga no more because I move like a mixed kid who grew up with my white mama, which I am, and I did. I made it clear off rip that I wasn't trying to be Malcolm. So if anybody betrayed the culture, it's the nigga who wrote All Right and then gave Taylor Swift a feature. Like, Drake literally said it himself that he could have had Kendrick's audience if he did the conscious rap for dummies thing. This isn't necessarily say that he could have done so successfully, because he very obviously did not do that. But the point is that a significant part of Kendrick's appeal is his politics. And don't tell me it isn't, or else half of hip hop YouTube since March wouldn't be halftime show breakdowns. So now that you know how to beat the boogeyman, we can get into the fun part, and let's talk about who can actually do that. Because as much as I would like to say insert lyrical miracle rapper here, it takes more than just bars to best King Boogie. Okay, so before I get into the actual contenders, I do want to shout a few folk that I know that y'all are probably going to shout out, like Gibbs and insert Griselda alum here, along with, Jadakiss, Nas, Black Thought, Bada, who some of them I think could probably handle Kenny in their primes. Not Benny or Gibbs. They got too many L's between the two of them, and that's their own fault for, putting their beef on social media and not on wax like it should have been. But I also didn't want to throw, Nas and Black Thought and all of those into this discussion, because saying that Nas would beat Kendrick is like saying Rakim would beat Nas or something. Like, well, duh, nigga. Nas is a Rakim clone after all. Even though for the record, Nas would clear, but that's not my point. So what you think about Nas?
Ether was like Ether hits that narrative experience pinnacle. The only reason I don't go with Nas is because of Nas's historical lack of consistency. Right?
Yeah.
I never understood how Nas made some of the music he made at the height of his career. Like, I always wonder, like, who was in the studio with Nas when he picked some of these people? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is he going through? Hold on, can we pull up Mr. Knock Boots? Like, but Bella, figure out a way to play this on show. So I can play Mr. Knock Boots.
When it comes to sex advice, I'm the one to call if you're a virgin with blue balls.
And you can hear this party ass beat. That is trash.
To keep this exercise as interesting as possible, I wanted to keep it the people who would have a reason to come for the crown. In other words, contemporaries and next ups only. And for y'all that are asking, I did strongly consider Schoolboy Q and Ab-Soul in here, but I mean, they've been his label mates for the last whenever. If they were going to go at him, it would have happened already. So it's a wash. So they're not in this. But before we get into the real contenders, like I said, I did want to give those folk their flowers so y'all can shut up. Now that we've established the angle, we got to talk about how it can effectively be used. I've chosen these contenders that are coming up based on what I'll call the 3 C's of competition, which are creativity, clout, and consciousness. Put them up on the screen, Clarence. So you won't see any battle rappers like Loaded Lux or Elliot Ness or Calico or Murder Mook or any of those other ones. Because I mean, if you saw that Daylight This video, you'll understand why battle rappers usually don't cross over into commercial success. It's not enough to just be Mr. Lyrical Miracle, or else Cannabis would be the real life Dylon.
Who are the 5 best rappers of all time? Think about it. Dylon, and Dylon.
I already explained in depth of the diss track what made the story of Adidon the most effective diss track in my opinion. But since we are talking about Kendrick, let's use what's still the best pure diss from that battle, as I said earlier, Euphoria. I'm not going to go bar for bar because this script is already so long. I wound up breaking the joint up into 2 parts, or maybe I kept it as one. We'll see when it gets put up. But Kendrick's thesis is that Drake is a poser, basically. Everything about him is manufactured, including his blackness. He's the most sanitized and commercialized kind of black you probably can be. And again, that was on purpose. Like I said before, the point of we don't want to hear you say nigga no more was never about his biracialness. It was the fact that Drake does and always has moved like a white man who wears black skin when it's beneficial. But when there's no bag to be made or his back is against the wall, he goes full Karen. Enter UMG drama. You can't decide that you're black when the cookout invites go out, but then revert back to beigeness when the cops show up. Kendrick could have never used that angle on Cole, because for all of his faults, Cole has always moved, at least publicly, like a black man. Hell, there's an argument that Cole is more the man Kendrick projects than Kendrick himself, but we ain't get there yet. Kind of buried the league, but whatever. Again, there were a bunch of ways that a more calculated MC could have countered the whole "you commodified your blackness" bit, but my point is, if Kendrick can't do anything else, he can paint a picture, man. There's a reason why the white folks have compared GKMC to the films of folk like Scorsese and Tarantino. So yeah, there's a bunch of super duper lyrical rappers that I left off this list because wordplay is basically their whole bag. So with that out of the way, now we come to clout, which should be self-explanatory, but I'll explain it anyway. Clout in this exercise isn't just insert rapper here has the bigger and or more obnoxious fan base, or else Drake would have washed Kendrick a year ago. We're considering both the quantity and quality of your fan base, plus your past rap battle performance if applicable. So yeah, you can and will get bumps based on sheer volume, but just having a bunch of fly-by-night bandwagon hoppers as the bulk of your fan base ain't going to hold as much weight as a dedicated cult following willing to go to battle at the drop of a dime for you. So a 10 on this scale would be something like, I guess, Barbs. So yeah, a cult basically, which now brings me to the final C of the three: consciousness. Basically doing the knowledge, and by the knowledge I really mean black identity politics, and by doing it I mean how much of your public persona is based upon it. Again, y'all are not going to sit here and tell me that Kendrick's politics are not a primary part of his appeal, or we wouldn't be pissing ourselves over that South Park movie that he's making. This section isn't really about you being left or right wing. It's not even about how right or wrong your politics are. It's about how much blackness informs your politics. And I'm not just talking about how black your music sounds, but how radically black you move in real life. How solid you are on what you stand for when push comes to shove in hell or high water. And yes, how knowledgeable you actually are in what you believe in. So points will be added if you've read the books, but if you've read the books and have done F and all else, that's going to deduct from your total. So whether you were raised by black revolutionaries or you are a card-carrying NOI minister, the more uncomfortable your politics are for white people to palate, the better equipped you are to call Kendrick on the carpet for his BS, is what I'm saying. This kind of goes hand in hand with the clout piece because, again, even if you haven't read all of the books, you can still play the consciousness card with, one, the way that you move in your community, and two, the way that you move in and around the industry. You know, the whole white folks stealing black art and sucking the soul out of it and selling the aesthetic back to themselves as something authentic. That was the whole point of that last scene of Sinners, right? I might actually have to do a video now because why is nobody talking more about that? So as a point of reference, a 10 in this category would be like Malcolm, I guess. And a 1 would be Myron from Fresh and Fit. And a 5 is like, I don't know, your regular, degular, everyday garden variety barbershop Negro. So it should go without saying that there will be no non-black rappers on this list. None. Especially not that one. And just so I can get it out the way, here are Kendrick's stats for the record at the time of writing. This, again, could change depending on whatever that Trey Parker BS turns out. I gave Kendrick a damn near perfect score of a 9.5 in creativity because, in my opinion, no one currently living can paint a picture quite like he can. And that's accounting for songwriting, theming, beat selection, the whole 9. Sing About Me, Duckworth, These Walls, Mother I Sober, and most recently Gloria are just a handful of examples of why Kendrick might be the greatest storyteller, not just today, but in hip hop history. And even the GOATs might co-sign that. I know that's high praise, but There's a reason why this nigga's fan base is so fanatical. I'm not going to spend too much time glazing Kendrick for all the things we already know, because like half of hip hop YouTube is basically just that. But again, this nigga is not getting compared to Biggie Smalls and Slick Rick. He's getting compared to some of the most celebrated directors in Hollywood history. Again, that's a minimum of a 9, and I'm gonna give him that extra half point. Clout in a vacuum, I think I would probably give Kendrick like an 8, but whether it's the bandwagon effect or this is just who his most insufferable stands have always been, but they didn't get the boldness to show their whole butt cheek until Drake took the L, Kendrick's popularity is bordering on at least Beehive levels in my opinion, even if temporarily so. It'll probably die back down to an 8 by the next project, but for now, I'll give him a 9 here. And then there's Consciousness. So this one I went back and forth on, because the tricky thing about Kendrick is that for people who didn't grow up on Spike Lee movies and Stevie Wonder records, Kendrick's music makes him sound like Huey's heir apparent. But that's the thing. If you did grow up in a predominantly black ecosystem, nothing he said in like the first 10 years of his career is anything you didn't hear being said by your local Hotep street preacher. So initially, I was going to give him a 7, maybe a 7.5. But then I was reminded that Mr. Morale exists and that he actually does do a bunch of stuff in his hometown, like, you know, giving out book bags and toys and paying off people's bail behind the scenes that never makes the papers unless it's a local one. So I wound up bumping him up to an 8 in this category. So with all of that out of the way, it's time for a death battle! Wrong channel. That's not copyrighted, is it? Look, Clarence, look that up before you leave that in the video. I'm so serious. So let's start with the most obvious one, right? Ever since the concept of a big three was conceived, a battle between Cole and Kenny is what a lot of fans have been asking for, whether casual or hardcore. For the purpose of this exercise, let's just pretend that 7-minute drill don't exist. I mean, the album is literally called Might Delete Later. That might turn into a definitely for the record.
I don't think it will go well for Cole. I think Cole is, and I think Cole be finding this out, especially more and more lately, that for all the fandom and support that Cole has, his bars don't stand up to much scrutiny. And I think that's kind of what happened with his attempted Kendrick diss, is that once you sort of enter the arena in that way and people are really looking at what you're saying and like, is it really dope? Is it really tight? Are you landing any blows? Like I feel like the big narrative even coming out of J. Cole's diss was him saying a bunch of stuff that it didn't even sound like he meant.
Right.
You know, like he's trying to trash Kendrick's catalog, but I feel like he was on record on every one of those releases saying how much he liked them. So
right.
You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
Like even his most harsh critiques of Kendrick just reflected back on himself in a way that like, oh, this isn't really the thing you can do effectively.
Here's the thing. I fully believe that Cole would lose and lose handily to Kenny, not because he doesn't have the ability, but because he don't got the cunning to go to the places that Kenny would to win. Bro is basically our Bob Marley, complete with biraciality. Yeah, I bet that one hurt for the 4 black grandparents folk in the audience, didn't it? So let's talk about clout and consciousness together here. I'm not going to get into it because it's already well documented, but I think Cole might have a slight edge on Kenny in this category in a vacuum, and even the edge over a few others that I'll mention later on down the road. He was at those Black Lives Matters protests. He raised a bunch of money for his hometown after Hurricane Florence. He bought his childhood home and converted it into a shelter for single moms. Even before the Dreamville Foundation, he was collecting school supplies for kids in his area. And also the Dreamville Foundation does exist. So even if he's not about the books, at the very least he is about the action, boss. He's an honest-to-God activist who so happens to rap, is what I'm saying. Low-key, I feel like his heart is further in that than it is in rap. at this point, which good on him, but ain't winning you no points in this made up exercise. And unlike Kendrick, he at least will take accountability when he does F up.
I ain't gonna lie to y'all. I moved in a way that I feel spiritually feel bad on me. You know what I mean? I pray that my nigga really didn't feel no way. And if he did, my nigga, I got my chin out. Take your best shot. I'm gonna take that shit on the chin, boy. Do what you do.
I'm not saying that Kenny don't do work in his own hood. I literally said he does up top. But activism is like Cole's whole identity at this point in his life. But how much of it is based in blackness? Again, consciousness for the purpose of this exercise isn't about how woke you are or are not. It's about how based in blackness your politics are. And Cole, to me, he doesn't strike me as one of those class, not race type of progressive, but he's also not, you know, blue-eyed white devil either. Cole's goals at this point, I genuinely believe, are let's just make the world a better place, which is why, to be real, I don't think he really has the heart to do what needs to be done to best anyone in a rap beef, honestly. Like, remember that time he dissed Lil Pump? Like, was that even a diss? Dog, I don't know. It felt more like a lecture from your guidance counselor to me. One thing Cole has over everyone else on this list, though, is the mainstream notoriety. Specifically, Cole's stands are just as, if not more, insufferable than Boogie. So the whole court of public opinion thing, at least at the beginning, would be a wash. You know, like if you want to see that Spider-Man meme in rap battle form, that's basically Kenny and Cole stands. And I'm not gonna lie, I would still pay money to see that fight. Maybe I wouldn't pay money. I'll probably steal my neighbor's cable for it, but I will find a way to watch it. All of that said, I don't think Cole really has the motivation to battle Kenny, and one has to wonder if he ever really did. Like, bro has basically always called himself the bronze medalist, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. He's perfectly satisfied with being the perpetual also ran. And I mean, at first glance, that sounds like shade, but that's better than a lot of his peers' legacy, right? Like, at this point, would you rather have Drake or Cole's legacy? I mean, one is actively trying to litigate a rap beef away to preserve the little bit of legacy that he has left, while the other is in Fayetteville somewhere riding his bike in a skate park without a care in the world. So yeah, there you have it.
See, here's my thing, and I've always like kind of felt this. Like, Cole is a great writer. Cole knows how to make a good song. Cole knows how to make like a song that can impact people and stuff. But I've always felt like he never was like a battle type person. Like, I just don't. Before he did the apology, there's evidence that it's not really in his heart to. Yeah. Even though he talks very competitively and says, you know, line him up, do this, that, and the third. I've never felt like, because, you know, the whole Kendrick thing wasn't the first battle that he'd been in and kind of double dutched a little bit. I've always felt that with him. So I don't think that he would be. I would have liked to see it when I wanted to see it, but my money would always probably be on Kendrick if it came to a battle, because also the thing about Kendrick is clearly where he's willing to go is not where Cole is willing to go. And if you're not, that's kind of why he backed out, because he knew that's how you get embarrassed completely. Because you're not willing to go where they're willing to go. It's gonna come out bad. So I never really looked at Cole as somebody who, you know, he's an elite pen, one of the, you can't tell the story of hip hop, especially in the last 15 years without him, but he's not really that energy, as we can see.
So let's talk about Cole's creativity for a bit. I genuinely feel like if he wanted to, Cole could craft a pretty compelling narrative about Kendrick's flaws. Lost Ones, 3 Wishes, Wet Dreams, Let Nas Down, not to mention the entirety of For Your Eyes Only. If you are a fan of hip hop, I really shouldn't need to sit here and convince you that Cole is at worst maybe a half step below Kendrick as a storyteller, at least narratively. I feel like Kendrick would still have the edge when it comes to the total songwriting package, but in putting pen to paper, I see them as near equals. His stories just don't have nearly as many drive-bys or child sex workers to keep the Grammy committee committed. So let's go ahead and give out some actual grades, shall we? Again, before y'all bust a nut over this grade, I'm not basing this rating on Cole's actual activism in a vacuum. I'm rating him on how radically black his politics are. And for that, I can't really give him no more than... Can't give him no more than a 6.5, to be honest. I'll give him an 8 for clout, because even with that apology, I think if he really had the heart, he could remind us all why we wanted this battle in a heartbeat, and then the stand wars would begin anew. Creativity is an easy 8 for me. Again, I know Cole would never use his powers to their full potential in a rap battle, but we're projecting here, just like a sports ball draft. I'm just looking at the tape and ignoring any character flags that may come up in the reports because my name is the Cleveland Browns. Since we're already in Dreamville anyway, let's go ahead and throw his label mate and on again, off again protege into the fray. Jid has as much claim to the next up crown as anyone in hip hop right now. And I don't think it's a stretch that not only does he feel like he's already there, but that he wants the king's crown at that. Also, he's from Atlanta, the black American mecca for at least the last like 2 or 3 decades, transplants and all. Like, let's not underestimate how big a deal that is. If Atlanta truly is the nexus of hip hop culture, how hungry do you think they are to finally have one of their contenders crowned king? Not of the South, but of hip hop, period. And Jid, I think, wants it. He don't even move with his own label mates like that, because in his mind, there's only room for one at the top of the mountain. As far as I know, Jid hasn't ever thrown any subliminals or called rappers out by name. I mean, there was that brief little tiff that he had with Tory Lanez on Twitter, and I mean, bro got his hair back and lost his mind. It is a bar, even if it wasn't put on wax. Funnily enough, Jid probably is the least in need on this list of me making his case, so I'm not going to spend as much time with him as I will some others. Maybe if this video was made 2 years ago, before surround sound became the backing track to that year's latest twerking trend, which is kind of where I'm going with this whole video, right? Hip hop today is probably as diverse as it's ever been, but the culture around it is the worst that it's ever been, if you ask me. Ironically, because of how accessible it is. I said this in depth of the diss track and the last culture war, but since streaming became the medium of choice for music heads, you don't have to listen to anyone but your fave if you don't want to. There's been a ton of study on this, but the great irony of the information age is that it's made most of us even more insulated than years of yore, when we literally had no choice but to leave our little boxes. Michael Jackson became the biggest pop star to ever live, largely because if you were a kid in the 80s and you wanted to watch music videos, all you had was MTV, and you were going to watch whatever MTV had on rotation, which many times was Michael Jackson. So even if you didn't like pop music, you didn't have a choice but to at least know Michael Jackson and Michael Jackson songs. Any of y'all who ever worked in retail know what I'm talking about. When I worked at Lowe's, I couldn't help but know who insert top 40 artist was, because that's all they ever played over the freaking PA system. You don't have to worry about that now. You can find your fave and just make a playlist made completely of their material and be satisfied until Tidal, Spotify, or whatever other platform you use suggests a new artist that you may or may not give a chance. So if your fave is a top 40 mainstay, who and what do you think the robot is going to recommend to you, dog? My point is, Jid was a problem well before he got popular. But the fact that he is popular now and became so not so long ago, that's why a lot of y'all will probably see this and say, yeah, that makes sense. I say that to say, I'm not really going to do the whole breakdown thing with him, because if you're watching this video, you probably already know everything I'm saying. But like I said, all the things that make Kendrick, Jid has that as well, even if to a slightly lower degree, or maybe a noticeably lower degree. Y'all get what I'm saying. I guess my one criticism is that his flow can be kind of hard to follow at times, and it like almost never changes, but that's more a personal preference thing. All that said, as far as I know, there's no real heat between the two. So this is all just really wishful thinking. I mean, this whole video is wishful thinking, but whatever. So let's go to the scorecard here. Creativity, I'm going to give Jid I will give him a 7.5 here. I might have given him a 7 before the Forever Story, but that whole album, Crack Sandwich, in 2007 in particular, really put his storytelling skills on display for me. Consciousness, I'm going to give Jid a 7. I've never seen Jid as a conscious rapper the way I didn't see Kendrick as one until the white folks decided he was after that first Grammy win. Again, if you come from where Jid or Kenny come from, none of this is new or enlightening, but at the very least, you got to give credit for their awareness of it, right? Again, this grading is based on how much these guys' politics is a part of their presentation. And Jid just ain't that kind of rapper, man. Which, believe it or not, is actually a good thing if you ask me. Which now brings me to clout. Again, context is key here. In the South, despite being the arbiter of black culture for the last ever, has never had one of their own spitters crowned king of hip hop or even considered a heavyweight contender. Okay, maybe Cole, but is Cole really a Southern rapper? Or is he just a rapper who so happens to be from the South? And no, I'm not counting 3 Stacks here because Outkast ain't really get their flowers until after they have basically hung it up. You know what I mean? So now we get to the grade for this, which I'll give him a 7.5 here, right? So yeah, there you have it. Dreamville's representatives would both probably get washed, but it's fun to think about, right? So let's go ahead to the left coast where our next contender resides. Someone who most definitely has the smoke, someone who low-key has held a not-so-secret grudge against Kenny for like 10 years, someone who coincidentally once held the next king of SoCal crown until his greatest advocate cast him off in favor of K.R.I.T himself. How many times I gotta tell y'all that Absol's not gonna be in this video? Y'all niggas don't listen, man. I remember reading an article in XXL, I think, where the game said he got shot, passed out, and when he woke up, he looked in the mirror and saw his heart beating in his chest. And it was at that point that I knew this nigga was basically a fun-sized Rick Ross. I know niggas forget how great a rapper the game actually is because of all of the antics. Like, don't forget, this nigga made a whole diss track against video victims. Like, how corny can you be, man? How about posting a Photoshop picture of yourself with Pac for clout, or chasing random D-list rappers around town so you can punk them for the same reason? Or how about having your own brother, who so happens to be one of the biggest gangsters in Compton, call you out for false flagging? My point is, the game lies for no reason. And okay, if you're like 25 and younger, I get it. You're young, you're insecure, you're finding your way in this world. But nigga, you 45 and you still rapping? Yeah, that bar aged like a dead deer carcass sitting in warm milk, didn't it, Jason? I don't want to speculate on the game's mental state, but something is just not right about a nigga who finds every excuse to self-sabotage to the point of effectively being written out of rap history by his biggest advocate. You see what I did there? I did it twice so that y'all could get the joke. I'm funny, man. No, I really am. Like, who else thought that it was kind of weird for Dre to do, you know, his own personal history in the Super Bowl show, and probably his biggest protege in the 2000s was left completely off of that card? Like, we couldn't even get a bar or two of Hate It or Love It or How We Do. But that's kind of where I'm headed. There's no good reason the game shouldn't have been a part of that show, and especially a part of the pop out, except for the game. I don't know, maybe you had to be there, but the game in a lot of ways was Dre's ideal protege, and Dre put everything he had in putting him on, from convincing 50 to induct him into the G-Unit stable, which obviously went swimmingly, to giving him some of his best beats. The game really had no one holding him from carrying the banner for the West Coast for the next like decade. No one but himself, that is.
Game could put Kendrick in some positions where he's being provocative enough with like West Coast LA specific stuff and cosigns. Like, Game could maybe assemble some LA folks that have cachet enough to where like it could kind of make Kendrick look a little silly if he don't say nothing. It kind of make it look like, you know, he's not repping LA like he says he does if he assembles the right coalition. So there's a possibility there. But yeah, I think when it comes down to it, Game has gimmicked himself into a corner.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into all of the game's BS because it's better documented than Trump's Epstein Island exploits, but I bring them up in passing because, again, niggas who just don't know the game from the many YouTube channels that cover his goofery really don't know how hard he is when he just sticks to rapping. Like, y'all are going to say I'm tripping, but the game wasn't dissimilar from Pac. And if you don't believe me, I promise you, like, half his bars is him saying that. The other half is riding Dre's coattails long after the doctor cut off his prescription. Like, yes, Game's bread and butter was and is the gangster bars, but he doesn't get enough credit for his consciousness or his storytelling, if you ask me. Like those 4 or 5 bars on Dreams where he tells the story of seeing Jam Master Jay talking to Eazy-E, like that still gives me goosebumps to this day. Like, go back and listen to the documentary. There's a reason why niggas my age call it a classic, up there with the likes of 2001 Doggy Style and the OG Chronic. This was my introduction to the West Coast sound, and I vividly remember thinking this is what hip-hop was probably going to sound like moving forward. Again, you gotta remember, by this time 50 had plateaued, Wayne was still Lil, and Kanye was a backpacker. Everything else was snap music and club bangers. So who was going to step into that street hop lyricism pocket but the Game? And I'm not saying this like, oh, well, I guess everybody else slept in, so here's your trophy, nigga. The Game was the total package. He had the clout, he had the punchlines, he had the beat selection. On top of that, he's like a hip-hop mockingbird. Any style of flow that you can throw at him, he can master it at worst and perfect it at best. Remember how I said a while ago that before Drake, every mainstream rapper worth a working Walkman displays some level of consciousness? Again, the Game really don't get enough credit for that. Maybe because consciousness became synonymous with, you know, Kanye by that point, so most of Game's audience would have considered it corny. I don't know, but bro really should have leaned more into that than, you know, the fake gangbanger thing. There's My Life, there's Jesus Peace, Letter to the King, and obviously Hate It or Love It, which to this day is still probably his best track. But then there's the Game's ability as a storyteller.
The Game certainly has he got the audacity.
Yeah.
Right? He got the audacity. And Game has proven that when he revs that machine up, he'll give you 200, 250 bars of real spit. And he's gonna make you stop what you're doing and listen. But you know, it's hard. Even when you go back to the Game time machine, I think even 10 or 15 years ago, Game's battling was starting to become so gimmicky that there's already this layer of, are people gonna take it seriously? Because it's kind of just what Game does, right?
Yeah, I know we clown him for the name dropping gimmick now, but back then it was novel. And when he does it on tracks like Dreams, it's less a gimmick than a narrative device. And then there's Like Father, Like Son. Long story short, it's the Game telling the story of the day his son was born, but it's so vivid that you can practically see yourself there with him. The Game had it all is what I'm saying. And he had Dre orchestrating it all, but again, the Game just couldn't help but being a big baby backstabber anytime he got a chance. Again, something ain't right about a nigga whose pattern is, I'm just going to burn every bridge anyone bothers to build with me, and then look around dumbfounded when nobody wants to mess with you anymore. And again, it ain't like the Game wouldn't have the smoke. Again, Kendrick is who he should have been, Dre's favorite protege. And it ain't like the Game didn't make a name by name dropping niggas and niggettes seemingly at random. He said himself that nobody from Compton can out rap him, including Kendrick, even though he put Kendrick a tier above him in that greatest LA rappers of all time list. Cognitive dissonance again, man. I mean, he already low-key kind of took a subliminal at Kenny on that Rick Ross diss. Something tells me the only reason he hasn't gone full disrespect is because who's going to take his side, man? Like, seriously. Nobody in the culture, let alone the industry, respects him enough at this point to even take such a shot seriously, let alone to take his side. It's just game being game, after all, which is a shame because all BS aside, he really does have the tools to go at it with Dot. So I guess let's get the grades in and out the way. For creativity, I'm going to give him a 6.5 because, yeah, the name dropping thing is more played than a high top fade. But in the context of a diss battle with Kendrick, that's where the game can really shine. And that's worth at least a half-point bump to me. Like, let's not act like the nigga didn't write a whole 15-minute long diss track aimed at everyone and those bars hit for the entirety of the track. Then there's the track that he made about Rick Ross that I mentioned earlier. And as corny as Wouldn't Get Far is, I'm not going to lie, it is effective in what it's trying to do, albeit what it's trying to do is corny as life, but we went over that. But speaking of effective, remember what I said about him being a mockingbird? The Black Slim Shady might be my favorite diss of his just because it kind of illustrates a lot of what I said up top about the game's wit and versatility. I hadn't even listened to it until Feek told me about it because the reception convinced me that it wasn't worth it, but then I had to remember that these are Eminem stands we're talking about after all. Like, if you go look at the comments of that video, it's plain that niggas missed the point probably on purpose and because they not niggas. Like, this joint is freaking funny, man. Like, I couldn't even really pay attention to what he was saying because he nailed M's lyrical miracle flow so accurately. I halfway forgot that it was game rapping at times. Like, could you imagine him taking the piss out of Kenny's monotone monologues and voice changes that have become his calling card at this point? Let alone doing it while mocking his barbershop politics. So yeah, 6.5 sounds fair to me. Maybe it might even be a little bit on the low end, but we'll stick with it. Ain't nobody gonna get mad at me about, depriving the game of a half point or whatever. Consciousness, I'll also give him a solid 6. Like I said, I don't let the cornball behavior fool you. The game is no slouch with his commentary. He just don't do it enough to get credit for it, which admittedly is his own fault. And then there's clout, man. Like, okay. I gotta give him a 2. -2. Again, dog, Dre basically wiped you from history, and that's on top of all the other bad blood you built over the years. There are so many ways for somebody like Kendrick to eviscerate game at this point. Like, there's way too many L's, dog.
I think the game is not like J. Cole, where he definitely has the capability of battling. I think he has the heart to do it. I think he is willing to go wherever you're willing to go. But my only thing about it is it's more like, because I look at like all of this kind of like sports. It's not really like his offense is going to be the issue. It's going to be his defense.
Yeah, I see where you're going. Yeah.
Way too much material. Like there's certain things that the game, you don't even really got to think like, and you can, with the same way that he had 3 tracks for Drake, you could do that with Game with 3 different eras of his career, the case that he caught, the way that he just lost. There's so much on him that's where I'd be like, I don't know if that would be good for him. I don't know.
Yeah.
And he just did his top LA rappers and he put Kendrick over himself.
Right.
Which is
right.
Like, I could like respect that, but like now if you battle me, what are we really talking about? The thumbnail,
right?
My thumbnail gonna just be that with a parental advisory sticker. That's gonna be it.
Yeah, Game doesn't get enough credit for like the West Coast was pretty much dead. He brought it back for like a split second, but he didn't have the artistic discipline, I think, if that makes sense. Like Game's just not artistically, I don't think he's a good rapper, but he's not really an artist. And I think just the rap game at the time didn't drive him to move effectively. So he just kind of oversaturated the market. I feel like he came out with like 4 albums in 4 years of descending quality. And then like nigga saw the butterfly tattoo and he used to be a stripper. Then he's got weird stuff with his kids. And
he lied about being a gangbanger.
Yeah, it's a lot of but he scraps.
Yeah.
Because 200 miles of
and he's
running.
Versatile.
Right. Like I'll never forget the 20-minute long diss to G Unit.
Right. What was that? 300 cars are running.
Yes. Like that shit was crazy, and the whole thing is good. You know what I'm saying? The whole thing is good. It's like people like is that a thing that has ever happened before? A 20-minute diss song?
Nobody respect him. Man. Nobody respect Game.
Maybe sometime between GKMC and TPAB, this still could have been a viable fight, but fake pictures with Tupac, man. Yeah, it's a wrap, dog. Okay, so we have yesterday's leader in the clubhouse, the sexy upstart, and now the left field long shot that feels less and less laughable the more you squint at it. But now we can get to some real contenders, y'all. The folk who not only have a chance, but have a reason. And we're starting with Mississippi's greatest export since public education. Yes, that is where that system started. Look it up or go watch my past video, nigga. Like I keep saying, only another Kendrick can beat Kendrick, and Big K.R.I.T has always, in my opinion, been the South's answer to K.Dot, down to the conscious rap adjacency and the religious imagery.
People sleep on K.R.I.T. It's crazy.
Right. The problem with K.R.I.T has nothing really to do with K.R.I.T himself. It's the fact that his label mishandled him early and bad enough that he never got the kind of money necessary to push his project to the same kind of notoriety as overly dedicated in Section 80. That and that he's from the South, the Gulf Coast part of the South. Yeah, and that bleeds through in his music the same way the West bleeds through Kenny's.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because now I'm thinking about it. Like, has the South ever had somebody who really was going at people like that? Was trying to like do that MCing, I'm gonna take the crown thing? Like, I'm trying to remember. Like, the closest I can think of is like T.I., but did T.I. ever really like go at somebody? He certainly could have.
As much as Kenny and the rest of the West talk about how they are so hated, niggas really don't mess with the South unless you sound like Future and Migos, and especially if you're not from Atlanta. But none of that is K.R.I.T. K.R.I.T is, again, the South's answer to Kendrick Lamar. And if you don't believe me, then you've never listened to Catalactica. If you want to tell me that Forever and a Day is closer to GKMC in theming like some of y'all have in the past and in structure, I'm not going to hold you. But for me, that tape is closer to Section 80, and that Section 80 is basically GKMC, the prototype version. It's everything that makes that album what it is, just without the polish and the atmosphere behind it. Remember what I said about Kendrick's ability to make you feel like you're listening to a movie, to transport you to wherever and whenever he wants through music? That's what Catalactica feels like. It's right there in the name. It's a celebration of all things that make the South unique from the left or right coast, with just enough social consciousness to satisfy the suburban transplants writing for Pitchfork and Complex. But most important for this exercise, it's a masterclass in storytelling the way that GKMC was and is. From beginning to end, you feel like you're riding shotgun with K.R.I.T and his candy-painted slab on gold 84s rolling through the traps of Meridian, Mississippi on a muggy summer afternoon. It's really a shame because all things being equal, specifically management, we're probably looking at a timeline in which K.R.I.T is spoken of with the same reverence as the Big Three is, or perhaps he even knocks Drake out of that conversation. One of the big knocks that Drake stands have always made against Kendrick and Cole is that they don't know how to make turn-up music, which is half true, but again, perceptions here. But half of K.R.I.T's catalog is ass shakers and trunk rumblers. I mean, he is from the South, the deep South, after all.
So I can see Big K.R.I.T just because I respect K.R.I.T's pen and his like capacity for creativity, because that's the key thing. The key thing is, one, what can be attacked, because the thing you also have to remember is that we can't just say like, what can this person do? We often have to think about what can Kendrick do against them.
Right. Yeah.
And Kendrick doesn't, like, K.R.I.T doesn't have, as far as I know, he don't have a lot of L's in his backlog. He's been really quiet. He's just making quality music. I think him being from the South is an advantage, because like the South just to me is the core of blackness in America. And so that just puts him closer to like the essence. And so like whatever he would come up with would probably be substantial. We probably get some really good music out of it.
The only reason that I have K.R.I.T rated toward the bottom of this contender tier list is because politics, I don't feel like have ever been a primary part of his appeal. That doesn't mean he doesn't have any. I mean, you got Soul Food, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Praying Man, the entirety of Forever and a Day are about as conscious as anything Kendrick or anyone else had made up to that point, and that's just the tip. The only reason, in my opinion, K.R.I.T wouldn't beat Kendrick in a diss battle is pretty much the same as Cole. I don't think he has the heart to do it at this point. I mean, we could have gotten this battle like 10 years ago when Crizzle clapped back at Control with Mount Olympus, but Kenny ducked him then and likely would now. Again, there's that ugly habit of throwing rocks and hiding when it's no longer convenient or when you got your hit in, whatever. But then again, that could also be used to K.R.I.T's advantage. You know, you spent the whole decade battling a nigga who you knew you would wash, but didn't bother to catch this fade from a guy that you knew would match you blow for blow. I wonder why that is. Like, let's not forget, like, half the names Kenny dropped on Control did respond, but the only one he thought was worthy of a clapback was Big Sean. Like, come on, dog. I love Kendrick as much as the next guy, with sense again. But you can't sit there and tell me that Big freaking Sean could get Humble and Element, but nobody else got a sub. Like, that's very Mayweather-esque if you ask me. That said, again, I don't think there's enough meat left on that bone for K.R.I.T to bother with. Not that I don't think he can't take it there, or rather that he can take it there, but at this point, what would even be the point? In a 2019 interview with Up Rocks, he called K.R.I.T is here a full circle moment for his career, which I don't necessarily think is meant to signify the end of it, but it definitely doesn't sound like a hungry up-and-comer gunning for the crown. And both his albums since then kind of sound like a man who's found his lane and is settled in it. I'm also not totally convinced that he'd have the support behind him to win in the public opinion category, even if he did go that route. K.R.I.T is one of those should have been biggers for reasons mostly out of his control, and I think that ultimately would be his undoing. But hey, the South has something to say after all, and maybe the Gulf Coast will show out for K.R.I.T the way that the West has for Kendrick. So grades. Let's start with creativity. This is an 8.5 for me when you factor in production. If you have to ask why, you probably had to ask who too. Yeah, K.R.I.T makes his own beats like Cole, but except his beats are not ass like Cole. Half the time I think I'm listening to a soul album until K.R.I.T starts to spit, and then I remember why the big three should have been he plus Big K.R.I.T. Well, I guess that's 4, huh?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
This is why I don't rap. It sounds good on paper, but it don't make a lick of sense when I say it out loud. But then again, Wayne used the elephant trunk sample on his last album. Play that real quick, Clarence, so I can laugh.
What up, though? All my niggas cutthroat. Cut a nigga head off, you looking like you fumbled.
Already mentioned Catalactica, but if you want the conscious storytelling again, there's, you know, all of those tracks that I mentioned earlier. If you want the trunk knockers, there's Money on the Floor, Aux Core, My Sub series, King of the South, Mind Control, Catalactica, the song, and like the whole album. And like I said, K.R.I.T not only responded to Control, but he had probably the best response of anybody. Mount Olympus is really more a middle finger to the best rapper combo in general than Kendrick specifically. K.R.I.T's thesis is that, again, niggas don't really mess with the South unless it's for trap music or titty bar bops, but then decided that he mattered once he got his name dropped by Kendrick. Like, I know it's not a diss track in the traditional sense, but there are a few subliminals in there, like, you know, the whole I'm overwhelmed by your dedication. You fooled these people into thinking your music was innovative. Like, you can't tell me that's not aimed at Kendrick. But again, niggas ignored it because it wasn't nearly as salty as some of the other diss. Like, part of me wish K.R.I.T had have took it there, because the only thing keeping him out of that combo was his management and lack of antics. I mean, let's be real. That's what it takes to get on these days, and that's even what it took back then. It's either you throw ass or you throw stuff around the room, or both.
If you listen to Mount Olympus too, you could hear the frustration. K.R.I.T was like very frustrated, and even at that time, the whole conversation of the big three wasn't solidified. There was like, people forget that there was a time where Drake was a little above everybody, but Kendrick, J. Cole, Big K.R.I.T, Big Sean, Meek Mill, Wale, were ASAP Rocky, were all looked at as the same like level. It wasn't like one person. It like slowly, it quickly actually became like Kendrick and Cole kind of took off them. But like that conversation at that time, a lot of people were saying were speaking of K.R.I.T the way they're speaking of Kendrick. There's people doing the same thing, and people kind of forget that. It's hard too, because I've never seen K.R.I.T in a like a back and forth. It's easier to go with Kendrick because now that we've seen it. So I don't know how K.R.I.T would handle a battle, because I love K.R.I.T, but he also gives me that super conscious, either in the beginning of the battle be like, we too big for this, or halfway through the battle be like, we too big. He gives me like that, not saying like he would apologize, I don't see him doing that,
right?
But I see him being like, I don't want to do this anymore type stuff.
So back to scoring, I'll give K.R.I.T a 7 in consciousness, just because he's displayed enough in his music to at least be comparable to Kendrick, and he hasn't said or done anything IRL to detract from it, but also his politics have never been a major part of his presentation, so I can't put him any higher than on par with, Cole or Jid or somebody. Clout is a hard one, because K.R.I.T is basically the Shelton Benjamin of hip-hop, and that he's so universally regarded as underrated to the point of near overcorrection. So he's got that underground crowd behind him on top of being independent. It don't get more anti-industry than that, do it? Plus, he's from the South again. Like I cannot overstate how big a deal it would be if the South had a legitimate lyricist to put on a pedestal and crown as their king while still in his prime. It wasn't, again, really until Andre 3000 had stopped making rap songs that the culture really acknowledged he and Big Boy's brilliance. Again, if you ain't about the antics, good luck getting on, and K.R.I.T kind of learned that the hard way.
For the heads who know, I think you really might have something there if K.R.I.T was really trying to come at him and really was coming with substance and perspective on trying to expose why Kendrick isn't XYZ or whatever. Like if K.R.I.T starts that conversation, there's heads that are listening.
If this had been 10 years ago, this will be an easy 8 in this category, but so much has happened, or in K.R.I.T's case has not happened since, that the casuals will probably brush him off as a bitter has-been off rip. So yeah, man, mournfully, I can't give him no more than like a 6 here. 6.5. All right, so while we are on the topic of subjects of that control verse, we moved to hip-hop savior who never was, because he was too busy busting down a Rothschild. Electronica quite possibly is the best to never do it. Like, I'm pretty sure the only reason we got an album out of him was because he was contractually obligated to put out something, and what we got was basically Jesus is King for Philly Muslims, but if Jesus was King was actually any good, that is. Electronica is a weird case, because more than anybody on this list, his legacy is largely built on untapped potential. But man, if that potential ain't transcended, man. There's a reason why old heads still talk about that Eternal Sunshine tape and just Exhibit C as a track, like the Hip Hop Edit. To this day, this is one of, if not the hardest 4-bar phrases I've ever heard. And that was before I even knew what the nigga was talking about. Everything you need to know about Jay as an artist is in those 4 bars, down to the bad Arabic. Y'all see where I'm going with this, right? Dude is the deep magic incarnate, which now brings me to the problematic part. If Nas is the OG Hotep MC, then Jay is the ideal, to the point of him almost bordering on being a caricature, down to the conspiracies and anti-Semitism. Jay is basically Broly, OG Broly, bootleg VHS Broly, Toonami special midnight screening of the movie Broly, the one that's so OP that making him canon would completely kill the power system in Dragon Ball, which I mean, Super Saiyan God kind of did that, but y'all know what I'm saying, right? He's Godzilla. You can't kill him. You can only hope to contain or distract him, and that's kind of the only thing that stopped Jay from becoming the next great Hotep hip-hop artist. Jay just doesn't care enough about the whole, being a rapper part of being a rapper. The recording, promoting, and touring part. Bro is basically the Beatles without the catalog, just dropping music sans promotion because the mystique alone was enough marketing by itself. And speaking of that debut, it's basically a Fruit of Islam manifesto, which shouldn't at all be surprising after the whole, hoax like Zelensky and Synagogue of Satan thing. I hadn't heard Farrakhan's name drop so many times since the Million Man March, and I was like 4 then. So yeah, I'm making that part up. But that's kind of what I mean about beating Kendrick with another Kendrick, right? I wasn't kidding about the Goku Broly analogy, or better yet, the Baki Yujiro. God, I hate y'all for putting me onto that for that dumbass show.
That's an ultra home.
He's an ultra.
And he's the only rapper rapping mathematics at the level he's at.
He literally.
I've never heard a rapper mention Farrakhan as much as Jay Electronica has.
Jay hasn't really been in the spotlight enough to have enough public L's, at least that he cares about, to exploit, aside from the anti-Semitism thing. But yeah, this is his profile pic on streaming platforms. I really don't think he cares too much about being called an anti-Semite, and neither will his stan base. This is the hardest of hardcore hoteps and hip-hop nerds we're talking about. Peak scare the hoes energy emanating from every Muhammad mosque and musty basement imaginable. And that's the thing. Jay, in a lot of ways, is the prodigal son who never returned. He is Anakin Skywalker, is what I'm saying. He will always be the chosen one until he drops a project that's so cheeks that it completely ruins his mystique. Like, seriously, he could never drop another track, and he will always be remembered for what could have been more than what we actually got. And what we actually got was even Grammy nominated. And that's, again, with the anti-Semitism on top. Like, I'm so convinced that if it hadn't been for those 2 bars, he probably would have won it.
The problem with Jay Electronica, I don't think white folks is gonna mess with Jay Electronica.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we gotta be realistic about how much of these rap battles are for the hearts and minds of casual white people.
Yeah.
And I just don't know. I think Jay Electronica has said enough things that people interpret as anti-Semitic to where, again, if people only need one dismissal point, they'll take that one.
Of all the rappers I've named, and more importantly, of all the ones who've publicly thrown shots, Jay is probably the one with whom Kendrick probably doesn't want the smoke the most.
Kendrick is again my all-time favorite writer. I always want to be clear to the actuallys in the crowd. When I say writer, I'm not necessarily talking about lyricist or rapper. I'm saying writer of rap music all times. But Jay is up there.
Yeah.
Jay, the reason why we've held Jay in our hearts for so long, even though this nigga comes around every blue moon, is because we remember Exhibit C. It's because we remember Eternal Sunshine, whatever the name of that joint was. And like he's able to write at that level when he wants to. Maybe he won his lick back after Kendrick went before him in Control and niggas forgot that he was even on the song. And inspired and like on time Jay Electronica, it's quite possible.
Because what do I keep saying? In every good lie, there is a kernel of truth. Again, if you grew up in that ecosystem, then you know that Kendrick and Jay Elect are, politically speaking, cut from the same cloth. Kinda. Like, I'm sitting here trying to really figure out an angle for Kitty to exploit here. Like, what is he going to do? Clown him for being a homewrecker? after making a whole album making penance for his own infidelities, call him out for hating Jews. The nigga who called himself an Israelite is going to call another black man a goof for anti-Semitism. The fact that A Written Testimony was so well received again by critics and rap circles alike, despite half the John literally being a Farrakhan sermon, kind of tells you all that you need to know about J Electronica's standing within the community. This is one of, if not the absolute worst well, maybe it's not the worst matchup. We'll get to that in a second, but it is up there as being one of the worst ones for Kendrick, because the crowd that he claimed to be fighting for in his battle against Drake, that's the crowd that will give Jay the clout to make this beef worth having. So Kendrick now becomes the Drake of this beef, ironically enough, the Bruce Wayne of hip-hop, who restore order to the culture only to himself come to symbolize all that plagues it. And by what plagues it, I mean white folks. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe an era and a day ago when they both were still just scrappy up-and-comers, this would have been a more even battle. But even with all that being said, I still think that too much has happened since, and Kendrick has gotten too big to win definitively, if you ask me. At least to the heads that know. You know what I mean? Kendrick, as much as he may despise it, is the industry. He made that deal when he blew up and went full steam ahead in the superstardom. Jay, on the other hand, is the antithesis of all of that. He could have, probably should have been a superstar. He is Anakin after all, but ironically enough, again, he said, I choose me before the blow up, and before Kendrick even thought to write that on paper. He said as much in A Written Testimony, along with telling us that a combination of addictions, insecurities, and the death of his mother kept him from dropping his long-awaited debut LP. Is Mr. Morale really going to clown him for confessing to any of that? Like, the only angle I could really see Kendrick taking in this thing would be, you know, new number, who this? Or maybe he could exploit the Rothschild thing, but again, the nigga literally broke up $1 million marriage featuring the family whose name has basically become a placeholder for Illuminati. It then based half his balloons feature on that. He's Hotep Jesus.
I would if that's a great angle to come with, but I would be shocked if Kendrick didn't then rebuttal that with the whole he was dating a Rothschild thing. And yeah. I think even though people like know that, I'll put it like this. People knew that Drake on stage kissing that minor video had been out.
Right.
Didn't discover that. Like, that been out. But if there's a way where when you put something in like in a battle or in a song and you amplify it like that, it almost recontextualizes it and recreates it. Because I know people who have been seeing that thing and been like, you know what? No, that was crazy.
Right. Right.
So I feel like where if someone might be like, well, people been knowing that, it's like, yeah, but I feel like if you do it the right way, people might be like, yeah, you were dating like what some people call literally the Illuminati. It's like where people. So I would feel like maybe he wouldn't do that, but I would be shocked if he didn't rebuttal it with that. And I feel like that there goes back to the diffusing where it's like, now I don't know if I should go with that angle because are we gonna play the you know
right? We're gonna play the Spider-Man meme.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole Fruit of Islam thing was always going to trip Jay up at some point in becoming, you know, the hip hop savior or whatever. But that's also his big red button in this beef. Jay was the living legend without a label. His best known track is he making a literal court case as hip hop savior, and he did it halfway as a joke. Had Act 2 dropped in 2010 instead of 2020, we might be sitting here talking about a big 2 and then a B tier composed of 2 biracial kids. Again, the only saving grace here is the assurance that Jay will drop the most scathing daily mathematics imaginable and then immediately go back into stasis for the next half century. And in the meantime, you just hope that your fan base is big and casual enough that just spamming the little bro button enough times will make them forget about all of the scathing half-truths that he dropped about you. Okay, so let's go to the scorecard, Clarence. I'm going to give Jay Electronica a 9 in creativity. If for nothing else, then his most famous mixtape is him rapping about metaphysics for 15 minutes over top of the score to a rom-com. It's to this day one of the most experimental hip-hop projects that you'll ever hear, especially in the context of the time in which it was dropped. 2007. Remember what kind of songs were topping the charts back then, right? Also, I don't feel like a written testimony gets enough attention outside of hardcore hip hop circles, probably because that whole synagogue of Satan thing. But again, we're moving along here. Jay was an oddball in the best ways, at least artistically, is what I'm saying, which is what justifies the 9, in my opinion. Which now brings me to the consciousness part. Okay, so remember how I said this category isn't really about how good your politics actually are? Still don't really know how to phrase that. This is what I was talking about. Remember, the angle on Kendrick is that he's selling black radicalism to white folks, while in practice, basically just being Obama with braids. Jay's politics are way too black for him to even be bought out, which sounds like a good thing, until you learn that this nigga, again, is literally an officer in the paramilitary wing of the Nation of Islam. You see where I'm going with this, right? The boogies are going to bust a blood vessel over this, but Jay and Kendrick, again, are cut from the same cloth, ideologically speaking, or at least they were made in the same sweatshop. In a different timeline where Kendrick does stand 10 toes down on what his politics actually are, he becomes whatever the Christian version of Jay Electronica is, or what that would have been 10 years ago, because the Christian version of what Jay is today would probably be Kanye.
Especially Hitler.
Jay has gone completely off the deep end since then, to the point of, again, basically being a cartoon. Like, he got Farrakhan's name tattooed to his forehead. It don't get more cartoonish than that. But how exactly does Kendrick counter that again? What's the angle you're going to take? Ha, you're a hotep? Kendrick is a hotep. An enlightened hotep, but a hotep nonetheless. Do y'all get where I'm going with this? It can't be you're a willfully ignorant anti-vax weirdo, because then Kendrick admit having his own doubts about the jab before he caught COVID himself. Like, the only thing, again, that Kendrick could really say is that he became what Jay would have been if he actually met deadlines. But that's kind of the magic of Jay Electronica, isn't it? He basically spent the last decade flipping the bird to the industry while he dealt with his own demons and picked up some new ones in the process. So again, this isn't about whose politics are better, but who actually stands on and for the type of blackness they rap about. And I'm sorry, Jay Clear's in this category, man. The nigga has Farrakhan tattooed to his forehead. I gotta give him a 10. I gotta give him a 10 in this. Again, this ain't about him having good politics, because he don't got good politics like at all. But because he stands on his BS 10 toes down, both in music and in real life. And that BS is, if nothing else, black as pitch, dog. So in that vein, I'm gonna give him, I think I'll give him a 6 in clout, which might sound a bit high, but like I said, the same Koofy Colt niggas who caped for Kendrick a year ago will flip flags in a minute for Jay in a heartbeat, the same way that they probably would for Nas, to be honest.
Let me just say, I don't feel like Jay Electronica has put out enough in his entire body of work for some of the praise that he gets, if that's the best way I can put it. Because even when you go back to that album where he had him and Jay, I think Jay got him on a few of them songs. And even there's an example why I feel like Jay Electronica would not win, and it's simply on High Power, when the way that Kendrick went when he said if not, then Cole, your beat is trash, and if not, I guess my opinion just made everyone laugh. The way that he minimalized Jay Electronica's anger, because remember, Jay Electronica went on that rant about why y'all like Kendrick, and the way that he diffused it with one little just kind of, it made me go like, oh, that would be if he ran that angle of, oh, he the big, loud, screamy, overly kicking knowledge type, and then there's also certain stuff where if knowing Kendrick, he could point the hypocrisies out in certain things. I don't think he has a great shot in that one.
See, I
now
feel
he's
like
a great rapper, so you never know. I'm just saying.
What I'm saying is, in this hypothetical rap battle, I could see one of two things happening. Either Jay manages to turn enough of Kendrick's casual audience against him, wishful thinking there, by pointing out pretty accurately that he is the raw black soap version of Kendrick that you get in the plastic pint container with the price written in Sharpie on the lid, and Dot is the factory farm joint you pick up at CVS that smells like Dove dipped in charcoal dye. So yeah, there you have it. He has Farrakhan tattooed on his forehead, man. Why, dog? So of all the people I've listed so far, Lupe Fiasco is the one most likely to make his Cold War go not only hot, but freaking nuclear, man.
Lupe has been battling Kendrick in his head for like 15 years now. Like,
yes.
So I think he knows exactly how he would go with that. So I think he would have a strategy. The knock that, you know, everybody's gonna say and Kendrick's gonna definitely lean into is, oh, you been hating, you been on my, you been, so it's gonna, you can make him look like the old hater who's hated on the young nigga since from the beginning because he used to be in your spot. You can do that angle all day, like I'm where you wish you were, I did what you do. If he were to battle Kendrick, I know he's gonna have some like government officials looking up his paperwork. Like he's gonna
you
go.
Know he is.
Yeah, because
he got a whole
like,
file on him.
He's gonna be the one who has like that board with a bunch of pictures and red lines connected and shit. Because he's gonna know that's the moment I know he's been waiting for.
I don't care what he said. There's no way all that smoke. There's no fire anywhere around it, no pun intended. Or maybe it is, I don't know. Yes, it is intended. Lupe is like that passive aggressive dude from the Progressive commercials.
Report when you need it. I wonder what that's like, huh?
Like, dog, you're not fooling anybody. You're not going to outsmart our outsmarting, and that's kind of his problem. Lupe is a huge, gigantic, humongozoid dickhead. He's elitist. He's pretentious. He would be a perfect video essayist, is my point. But dog, if he can't wrap circles around every one of your faves, man. Lupe in a lot of ways was Kendrick, but like 5 or 6 years too early when we were still knee deep in Wayne's run at the top. And worse than that, he's one leaked album from probably getting the flowers that he deserves, and most definitely will remind you that he deserves. I'm not going to step on too many toes here, partially because Lupe is probably watching, and I'm not even joking about that part. But by the time this goes up, you either will have or will be watching two friends of the channel make Lupe Fiasco videos, so I'll leave that to them.
He won't be outbarred.
Yeah.
And he'll maybe be outwritten, but not by a ton. The reason why I think Lupe has the strongest chance, but I think the Lupe would ultimately lose because Kendrick has a Trump angle on him, which is that he is who Lupe wanted to be, and that's the worst of all the angles he could take on any of these other figures.
Yeah,
I don't know if any angle would hit harder and resonate more than if Kendrick took that angle.
Lupe is, as the homie FD said, Kenny with songwriting and charisma turned down, but lyricism and politics turned like all the way up. This isn't to say that Lupe doesn't have his own history of head-assery, but his head-assery isn't based in pseudoscience or barbershop politics. It's low-key kind of a shame that Kick Push became such a large part of Lupe's legacy because he wound up being saddled with the Backpacker label as a result. But Lupe is a lot more Kendrick than he is Kanye, if you don't know that. Matter of fact, Lupe might be more Kendrick than Kendrick, to be honest, or at least more of the Kendrick that the Boogies bust nuts over. Again, I don't want to step out of my lane too much here because I don't have all the deep lore behind this, but I remember reading a XXL article back in the day where Lupe talked about being raised by ex-Panthers and Green Berets. Remember how I said I fell in love with Kendrick's music because before GKMC I never heard My Childhood put on wax before? Honestly, my life was probably closer to Lupe's than Kendrick's, which is why I know that Lupe knows the deep magic. I was the kid who was never impressed with guns because my uncle kept a sawed-off in a guitar case under his bed that he showed me and my cousin how to shoot when we were like 12 and we nearly blasted a hole in the wall. I fell out of love with hip-hop in high school because being raised by black excellence adherents, even if they weren't participators, turned me off to the excess and vulgarity that kind of defined the video vixen era that I came up in. I was the kid with dope boys for friends who told me to stay in the house and read my books and play my guitar so that I could get out the hood one day and remember them when I did, until they needed a lookout when they broke into stash houses. But again, that's a different video for another day. Lupe is the kid who you would never guess had gangbanger buddies because he actively distanced himself from that presentation. And I get it, but dog, that's your own fault that folk who don't listen to you don't know about your knowledge. Like, Lupe has always had that I'm not like other girls energy to him that turns a lot of folk off to him, you know? Like, okay, we get it. You were an anime nerd before it was cool. You named the whole album after an Akira villain, but who is Dumb It Down for besides, you know, living well actually memes? Lupe is the type of nigga to post pictures of his pieces to his IG to let you know how tough he is, which he did. Granted, Royce did it first, but y'all get my point, right? That said, that Lupe ain't the one to mess with. I don't even know why I brought that point. I did. Dog, just I won't ever come to Chicago anytime soon. So you ain't gotta worry about having smoke with me, dog. He acts like the guy who never got over getting his pants pulled down in front of the girls during gym class. That on top of the fact that he has a bit of respectability to him is what I'm saying, and I'm not going to bother getting into that because John Lewis already has. But insofar as a rap battle, he has everything to more than hold his own against Kenny, and he knows it. Even if I don't think he's as great a storyteller as Kendrick, it doesn't mean that he can't paint a picture. To this day, Hip Hop Saved My Life and The Cool are two of the greatest storytelling hip hop tracks I've ever heard. The Cool might actually be, if not my favorite, then definitely in my top 3. And all of that being said, the diss tracks, man, like, just go listen to the. I'm serious. Stop the video and go listen to the John that he made about Royce 5'9". I've never heard a more thorough evisceration of a man on wax before that. Not Checkmate, not the story of Adidon, not even Meet the Grams. Oh my God.
So Kendrick will be taking a break, and unlike Drake, who was like, "I'm waiting for you to respond," Lupe will fuck around and have a whole double album in 3 weeks.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, cause Lupe is a petty dude. He's a petty, spite-driven dude. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you he has schemes and bars already in his spirit waiting on it. You know? So this would be a huge landmine for Kendrick.
What makes it so worse is that we effectively saw Lupe's process in real time. It's probably not up anymore, but he shared an IG live of himself listening to Royce's track, like the first half verse of Royce's track, cut it off, came back like 3 hours later, and basically wrote Royce's obituary. Again, if you've never heard Lupe on Demon Time, do not talk to me about what Dot would and would not do to him. I promise you, with the animosity that Lupe has built up over the better part of a decade, dog, he's going to make Meet the Gram sound like doing the butt. But then again, that might ultimately be his Achilles, right? A beef between Kenny and Lupe would be largely one-sided and come off as bitter. as somebody tearing down a peer for the sake of his own relevance. Sour grapes is what I'm saying. I might not agree with that, but that's the way that the general public will probably perceive it. It's the angle that I could see Kenny taking, and he wouldn't be totally wrong. Also, like I said, these two are cut from similar cloths, inconsistencies and all. It's just that Lupe knows enough of the deep magic that he can low bro Kenny's politics at will if he wants to. But the question is, can he stay focused long enough to really capitalize on that? Nothing Kenny can say hasn't already been said by Royce, is what I'm saying. And we've already seen what a Lupe clap back to that would look like. Now imagine if he took his time and did it to someone who he has legitimate animosity toward. Jesus. Okay, so grading time. I'm gonna give Lupe a 9 in consciousness because I had to dock him a half point because he has a little bit of that pull your pants up energy to him, and that's also going to knock his clout score. Again, we're not worried about whose politics are better. We're talking about whose politics are the blackest, and Lupe has a little too much respectability to make his clout score too high, and his consciousness score for that matter. It's not the respectability in itself so much as it's one of several reasons why niggas don't really mess with Lupe the way that they do with Kendrick currently. It's not just the skateboards and robots. It's the fact that he's basically that beat it chick meme but with his politics. That's why I keep calling Lupe the OG think piece black. It's not enough for you to do the knowledge unless you know he was doing it before you and doing it better than you. You know that part in Shrek Forever After where Rumpelstiltskin goes, "Nobody smart but me." That's Lupe, and that's why Negroes don't mess with him. Well, Negroes outside of Chicago don't, because Lupe actually does do work in his city, and he won't let you forget that either. So in a vacuum, I feel like Lupe has built a big enough body of work that he deserves a solid 8 in clout, but I do got to dock him for being a dickhead, which brings him down to a 7. Which now leaves us at creativity. This is probably the easiest one-to-one comparison to Kendrick because he and Lupe are the same kind of rapper, but one pulled most of his stats into lyricism and the other in storytelling.
The thing that Kendrick has over everyone, even including Lupe, is that thematic resonance that he's able to make happen with his songs. When I think of cartoons and cereal, when I think of Sing About Me, when I think of Mr. Morale, when I think of so many of those songs, those are experiences.
Again, Lupe is no slouch when it comes to weaving a narrative, but he's just not Kendrick Lamar in that category. If they ever squared up, though, I don't think the gap is big enough that he can't win, but it is big enough to put him at least a point lower than Dot. So I'm going to give him... I guess I'll give him a 7.5 for creativity. So yeah, there you have it. Lupe, don't shoot me, man. All right, so of all the MCs on this list, Noname is the only one that I would bet my left nut that Kenny has not a snowball's chance in hell of beating. And we all kind of know why.
Ooh! I would love to see how some Kendrick supporters would react.
Exactly.
If Noname really like served Kendrick up some cogent points. With over a deadly beat, with a sing-songy, confident, conversational, just giving it to him, and just giving them bullet points, giving you something to chew on and think about. Oh man, wow, that's a great one.
Noname in a lot of ways is what I think a lot of people think Kendrick is, which I mean, depending on how you take it, can be either a gift or a curse. Like, I hate to keep comparing these folks to Kendrick, even though that's kind of the point of the video. But Telephone to me sounds like GKMC, but for middle class kids, which again can be a good or bad thing depending on how you take it. Room 25 to me sometimes borders on browbeating you with his consciousness. Like, I'm not saying it's bad. Like, I really enjoyed that album. It's stellar, especially for a debut. But I feel like this is No Name in her "you just wouldn't understand it" phase of her consciousness. It's specifically tracks like Prayer Song give me that whole "let me talk above you because I've read the books" type of energy. Like, if there is a weakness in No Name's game, it's that she could come off a bit sanctimonious, a little preachy at times. Also, this is just a personal preference thing, but I'm not the biggest fan of her flow. It's the same issue I have with Jib, where sometimes I have to stop and read the lyrics, not because I missed a metaphor or something, but because there's literally no time for my brain to process one bar before she spits the next one. Again, now that's just me, and it did get better on Sundial. But I don't want y'all to take any of those criticisms as knocks, man. No Name is, oh my God, she is not only a stellar MC, but she got the knowledge, dog. Like, for real, got the knowledge, man. While we're on Sundial, as a matter of fact, I feel like the reason the messaging of this album was so strong is because No Name wasn't afraid to hold herself accountable for being part of the problem. And I don't mean in the take me as I am way that Kendrick tends to do at times, but in the I'm working on being a better version of myself, but I'm not going to lie, it's a bit to get there way. Which makes all the shots she throws at the culture and peers within it less preachy in context than they are a plea for niggas to stop falling for the okie doke. Like I try to tell y'all on every other one of these videos. Like I said, I've been a No Name fan since Room 25 and then went back and listened to Telephone. But Sundial is really when I knew what type of time she was on, because what other rapper do you know is going to call out Obama for bombing black folks? What other rapper do you know would risk alienating their white fans to speak the truth about their voyeurism? Well, I mean, aside from me, obviously. And call me a conspiracy theorist, but a part of me feels like she was thinking about Kendrick when she wrote that. Like, yeah, I know she was writing from her own perspective, but No Name's catalog isn't so gory that I would have known that she was the subject of that track had she said anything. Matter of fact, I would bet my left butt cheek she is talking about "Sing About Me" with that whole, you know, pull up the lyric card, Clarence, so that they see what I'm talking about. And even if she wasn't thinking of Kendrick, that's the kind of ish I'm talking about with No Name. That is the angle, and ooh, that John would burn like soap in your dick tip. Like, half the album sounds like a video essay. And again, that can be hit or miss depending on what you want rap music to be. Like, I'm never going to give Sundial the car test treatment, but man, oh man, does that John hurt in the best possible ways. Not just for the people she called out, but for me personally. The fact that the next track in the album explicitly does reference Kendrick, I think supports my theory about the track previous kind of being a sub toward him. You know what I mean? I can see No Name being pissed about the Kendrick comparisons when she knows, and we who know better know, that he ain't really on the type of time that she's on. That's not a knock. It just is what it is. No Name is never going to play a Super Bowl show. She's probably never going to accept a Pulitzer Prize for her lyrical activism. She's probably never going to do a photo op with POTUS unless they're at least as radical as like AOC or something. And I ain't really saying much. She is the closest thing to a revolutionary rapper that we've had since Tupac, but her beats sound like elevator music. I ain't even gonna lie. Again, I love No Name, and I don't dislike the jazz hop thing. And a part of me wishes that she got the push that Doechii is getting now. And for the record, I love Doechii too. But you're not going to get that when your production sounds like the backing band at a slam poetry jam. I'm sorry, dog. I love it, but again, we talking about the casual heads, man. Like I said, she is exactly what all those white housewives I mentioned earlier probably think Kendrick is, but she don't get the clout because, one, she actually is about that kind of time, and two, Let's just be real. It's because she's a woman, a dark-skinned one at that.
That's tough, man. That's tough. Cause then even Kendrick, right? Like, how does he respond to that? He can't respond super aggressively,
right?
You know,
that just what happened to Cole.
Gross. Yeah, exactly.
But remember what she did to the last fake deep nigga who had smoke? The only reason song 33 isn't in my personal Mount Diss more is because noname said herself it wasn't really meant to be a diss, which kind of makes it scarier if you ask me. Imagine if she really hyper-focused on Cole instead of using him as a platform to highlight the bigger picture. Again, I generally don't know what's scarier, noname with a grudge or a goal much bigger than you that she's using you as a vehicle for. She, like Lupe, was raised in the deep magic. Her grandparents haven't owned an Afrocentric bookstore, but more importantly, she's put in the work to make her politics actually mean something beyond the aesthetic, and it reflects in not just her music, but in the way that she moves. Like I said before, TPAB is at worst the second most important album of the 2010s, if you ask me, right behind D'Angelo's Black Messiah. But dog, Sundial really should have had the impact on the culture that TPAB ultimately did. But I'll argue that it didn't because it was way too real. It was way too, dare I say, revolutionary. Too many niggas caught strays in that album for it to get more than a best new music nod and a handshake. Like, if y'all want to think piece of black art to death, that's the one to give that treatment. But we not, because it means a lot of us who are making Give Us Free the backbone of our presentation, nay, our personality, have to face the fact that a lot of our politics is BS. Let's be real. But therein is what could potentially trip noname up. Remember what I said about her coming off as preachy at times? Remember during COVID when she tweeted about what other artists weren't doing for the culture that made them rich, except those artists were actually doing those things, namely Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole, even though she didn't mention them by name, but that's what folk kind of ran with, to the point that Cole interpreted as such, and that's how we got the whole song 33 thing. The subtext of Snow on the Bluff, the response to noname's tweets, which itself was the song that inspired song 33, was that even if Cole doesn't read the books, it's because he's too busy doing the work. Listen, I love noname as an artist, and in isolation, song 33 is as effective a diss track as you're going to get. But in context, I ain't gonna hold you, dog. That was very white leftist TM of her. And to her credit, she knew that, which is why she wound up walking it back.
Whether good, bad, or indifferent, which I think it's a bad thing, I think people aren't going to put the same value of that loss that they would some other loss. Because if you technically look at the J. Cole one, he kind of lost to her a little bit. Like, if you really think about it, but nobody really cared. Like, it kind of just like moved on. But then him not participating in a battle, which was insane, but was more of a stain than him losing to noname.
The issue I always took with her, even with the J. Cole shit, was although J. Cole was overall in the wrong, what that did amount to was a bougie Negro talking down to a nigger from the streets about how he engaged with the struggle that actually affects him more than it affects her. You know what I mean? And what was it? It was something else, but that was the main thing. It was like, all right, we're kind of missing. And that J. Cole had been in those trenches for years and just didn't like talk about it. Didn't take pictures, didn't do photo ops. So if anyone was not to get that smoke, it would be J. Cole. Now, if the nigga didn't say I don't read books in the middle of his track, maybe this would have ended differently.
Like, if Cole really wanted to, he could have clapped back, making exactly the point I just did. But for the benefit of us all, he didn't. Again, I don't think Cole's heart is dark enough to go back and forth with a woman, a dark-skinned woman at that, over something as petty as rap beef. I'm not saying that Kendrick's is, But we don't know until we know, in the same way that we didn't know that with Cole. And this is kind of what brings me to the whole unwinnable beef thing, right? As hard as it may be to admit, Kendrick, not unlike Jay and Bey and even Nas, has commodified black radicalism without actually practicing many of the politics, and has done so to an audience of primarily non-black people. I'm not saying that that's inherently a bad thing. Like, as a black entertainer myself, this is what we do. I understand that all of y'all ain't niggas. We are all, at the end of the day, selling blackness to make a bag. I'm just one of those people who decided a long time ago that I was going to be honest about that with both y'all and myself, and that I was going to make y'all as uncomfortable as possible about consuming it, which is kind of what noname did. Like, Balloons wasn't just rap. She really did threaten to quit making music if it was just white folk supporting her work monetarily. That said, Kendrick could always take the petite bourgeois angle here. You know, the girl from Hyde Park talking down to the kid from Compton for being too busy planting money trees to read the right books to do enough direct action for her liking. But then noname's angle is so obvious, I really shouldn't have to say it out loud, should I? But I will, because some of y'all like to act denser than an overmixed box cake. Don't let no white comedian talk about black women, but it's a-okay for a black rapper to abuse one. And that's just the beginning. Tear down his politics bit by bit, basically little broing his whole gimmick. Like, remember what I said about matchups? I know what I said about Jay Electronica earlier, but noname is Kendrick's Kendrick, is what I'm saying. She is the worst absolute matchup that I could conjure up for him. She, at the very least, has developed the goodwill to withstand any accusation made against her. If for no other reason, then she has always at least acknowledged her shortcomings, self-reflected, and changed course when necessary. Again, Kendrick doesn't typically do that, or at least he hasn't since TPAB. He either ignores it or deflects. That's not going to work with somebody who is him, but with better politics. Much better politics. Her ego isn't so big to blind her to her own flaws, and her stands aren't so loud that she can deflect with the, well, I'm a hypocrite after all. That's what makes me so lovable and relatable. You know what else is relatable? Accountability. But alas, I don't see this one. Maybe it could happen, but for the love of God, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to worry about the misogyny piece, right? But in a perfect world, adjudicated sex offenders wouldn't be boosting their approval ratings by putting their names on saving accounts for babies they'll never be born, because nobody of childbearing age can afford to have a headache, let alone a child, you freaking imbecile. Like, even if inadvertently, there's no way Kendrick doesn't get a manosphere power boost from the same niggas who were taunting him to drop before he drop kicked their biggest booster in the chest. At EOD, we're talking about a dark-skinned black woman having to battle both Kendrick Lamar and his most vocal fans. And by fans, I mean the OV hoes with an Audible account. Y'all know what I'm saying. I shudder to think what the comments of those videos would look like. Probably the way the comments on Anxiety and the Timeless remix are now. So, as fun as this would probably be to get an intergender rap beef that's worthy of the marquee, let's hope it never happens. So grades time. Noname is going to get an easy 9.5 in consciousness. Maybe y'all think that that's a little high, but dog, it's not like it's not deserved. If I gave the nigga with Farrakhan tattooed on his dome a 10, what do you think I was going to give the girl who spit the whole song calling white leftists down on the carpet? The only reason that she don't get a perfect 10, again, is that nasty self-righteousness thing, you know, the absence of class consciousness thing that has bitten her in the past, but that she has worked on. But there's enough of it from her past that you know I can't give her a perfect score in this category. Creativity, I will give her an 8.5, just because Telephone did such a great job painting this slice of life picture that hasn't left me since. And again, Sundial is right there. Again, I'm comparing these folks to Kendrick, who I gave a 9. And this is the nigga who wrote 3 albums that feel like movies and one that actually is one. So this is what you're up against. The jazz beats are cool and all, but after a while the novelty kind of wears off of me. And I know this is going to piss some of y'all off, but name dropping capitalism and globalization ain't really the flex Bread 2 thinks it is, when niggas have been articulating these concepts before, even if they didn't know the names for them. So yeah, I feel like an 8.5 should be fair in creativity. Again, this is the same score that I gave Big K.R.I.T, and he basically made the country fried version of Illmatic with Catalactica. Don't at me. Clout, this is a tough one because Noname has flirted with the mainstream, but can't quite get out of that indie artist pocket, mainly because of her politics, which is good on her, but it don't help for the purposes of this exercise. That said, oh my God, I can't imagine how insufferable Think Peace Twitter would be if these two ever came to blows. Dog, y'all think the Super Bowl videos were aggravating. I can see it now. When black artists fight, we all lose. Kendrick versus Noname, metaphors and misogynoir. Jesus Christ, oh my God. Never mind. Forget that I ever even brought it. Forget I brought this one up. It's a 7 though. Give her a 7, Clarence. Which now brings me to the most likely of all contenders on this list. Drum roll, please. It's Joey Badass. Duh, nigga. All right, so I know that this looks like one long, elaborate ruse to make my case for this beef that really isn't, which low-key it kind of is. But trust me, it didn't start off that way. Originally, I had Joey in my honorable mentions tier for a lot of reasons that y'all said he wasn't even worth the time. But then after having a conversation with someone who I both respect and let's just put it this way, has a lot more knowledge on this subject than I do, I couldn't help but come to this conclusion. First, let's tackle the whole Joey is just not big enough argument, which I hated in principle, but hate even more now because this is exactly the argument that Drake stans made against Dot for about a decade. Yeah, I'm starting to think there's something to that whole refugee thing now, right? Moreover, it's simply not true. All right, so Joey's never plagued. I'll give you that. But Before the Money and All American Badass both debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200 and number 1 and 2 respectively on the R&B hip hop charts. Matter of fact, Before the Money and Lupe's Tetsuyo and Youth debuted the same week and Joey beat him. Matter of fact, if we going to do the whole not big enough thing, Lupe hasn't plaqued since Lasers. That came out in 2011. You know what else came out in 2011? Section 80, which debuted at 113 on the Billboard 200 and didn't make gold until 6 years later. And in between Section 80 and GKMC, the TDE Aftermath machine was working overtime to market Kendrick as the West Coast Messiah. Look, despite the deriding I'm bound to see in the comments, I'm not taking anything away from Dot. I'm just making the point that Joey had already released a classic mixtape and a chart-topping LP by his 20th birthday. When Kendrick was 20, he was still at least a whole 2 mixtapes away from overly dedicated. That's the thing a lot of us, including myself, keep missing about Joey. This nigga was born in the 90s. The mid-90s. 1999 was released when he was 17. This nigga is quite literally a prodigy. Jid didn't really start getting some motion until like what, 2019, 2020? He would have been pushing 30 by then and still didn't have an album chart until The Forever Story a few years ago. That topped out at 12. And also Jid has no plaques. I'm pretty sure 12 is lower than 5 on the chart. I don't know. My glasses, they may be dirty, dog, but I can do mental math. All I'm saying is maybe our perception is skewed by the fact that Joey just kind of disappears for long stretches at a time between projects, not unlike Kendrick. Like, none of the Griselda niggas have ever plaqued or cracked the top 25 on the Billboard. Freddie Gibbs, yes, has a Grammy nod, and a vocal contingent of hip-hop heads still argue that he probably should have got that win, but again, he has no plaques. noname, JPEG Mafia, Denzel Curry, Saba, Lil Sims, Vince Staples, and yes, even the internet's favorite rapper right now, Doechii, have all never plaqued. I mean, Lil Sims did technically get some British shirt, but she pushed like 70K units, so that don't count. Point I'm getting at is niggas just don't buy music anymore, not unless you're already an established A-lister. And if you want to play the streaming game, yeah, Joey beats them all in monthly listeners, with the exceptions of Jid and Doechii. And in the case of the latter, he still beats her in total streams. What I'm saying is, based on the numbers, Joey's just one hot album and a TikTok trend away from blowing up like Doechii and Jid did. And he's 4 years younger than Jid. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Again, our perception is skewed because one, Joey's been around forever, and two, 30 is not nearly as old as y'all make it out to be. It just looks that way because I have no hair. Okay, so remove Pac and Big from the equation because we never really got to see what their peaks would have looked like. Who are some of your personal goals? And don't say NBA Youngboy or Tory Lanez. I swear to God, I will reach through this screen if you do. By the time Volume 3 dropped, Jay was already in his third decade. Kanye didn't drop his debut LP until he was 27, and his most insufferable fans didn't hop onto the crazy train until 808s at the earliest, and more likely around Twisted Dark Fantasy, so well into his 30s. Nas was pretty much in the same boat where his best work was more an albatross than an advocate for his legacy, like Joey Badass. And I mean, you can, and I will argue that It Was Written is sonically a better album than Illmatic, fight me, but that's not the point. The culture, and by the culture, I mean the critics and people who get all of their music opinions from them, have written Nas off as just another also ran by his 28th birthday. And then Stillmatic happened. And even then, Nas didn't really reach his full Super Saiyan potential until Life is Good at the earliest, so early middle age. Even Kendrick didn't really come on until his mid-20s, and by the time we got TPAB, Buddy was pushing 30. My point is, like I've said before, the music industry doesn't sell you music. It doesn't sell you artistry. It sells an image for you, the consumer, to live vicariously through. A sexy, youthful one that burns bright and fizzles fast. That's part of why our image is so skewed. But the truth is, the best rappers, like actual rappers, are all 30 plus. It's just like the NBA, coincidentally enough, where dudes feel like they've been around forever because they have. Then they hit their late 20s and go into another gear, and we're all like, what happened there? And unlike the NBA, you don't have to worry about age sapping your talent before you really learn how to harness it. That's how we got Nas going on one of the greatest 3 or 4 album runs of all time at damn near AARP age. That's how Jay winds up writing one of his best albums at middle management age. That's how Ye... Let's not talk about Ye.
Especially Hitler.
What I'm saying is, perception tells us that Joey is washed.
Joey has sort of started this beef, and then Rayvon comes at him, and then when he starts dissing back, it's like, like 30 seconds in, it's like, I think y'all some homos. What? Like, what? What? In the year 2025.
But the reality is, he's probably just getting started. Perception also tells us that Joey is just a generic boom bap battle rapper, but he has more than the conscious to do the knowledge. He already has his own TPAB and All American Badass, which I'm not gonna lie, might be my least favorite of his albums. It's not to say that it's a bad album at all. It's actually a good one, but how do I put this? So if you grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, then you probably seen those super duper Afrocentric preschools and daycares. You know, you probably even went to one. The ones with like Days of Kwanzaa in the name, like Ujima Academy or Asante Kids Care or something like that. The ones with the Black History posters plastered on the playroom wall year round. That's the energy that this album gives. It's not that it's bad again. It insists upon itself.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
Ironically enough, American Badass is the TPAB that a lot of folk think and thought TPAB was when it came out, and even still think it is today. Again, for the Kenny Cum Lickers in the audience, I'm not saying that TPAB is a bad album. I've said multiple times it's one of my favorite albums, period, regardless of genre. I've also said that it's no less than the second most important album of that decade. That said, it is not the damn I Have a Dream speech. In the past, I've compared To Pimp a Butterfly to Sign of the Times, in that neither Prince nor Kendrick actually offer any real suggestions, let alone solutions to any of the problems in the world that they point out. Kendrick articulated probably better than anyone else at the time, in my opinion, many of the fears and frustrations that Black millennials had, especially those of us from underserved neighborhoods. That's what made it resonate with us so hard. Joey, on the other hand, made a whole album's worth of "Brother, Can I Speak to You?" And I'm not gonna lie, it comes off a little like it's like something early Lupe would have made if he wasn't such an a-hole. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is, a lot of y'all are underestimating Joey's range, because let's be real, a lot of y'all never really listened to him before the finals, which itself sounds like a time capsule from the rap battle golden age that was the mixtape era. That, I think, is one of Joey's biggest, why did I say biggest? Best characteristics. I'm tired, dog. He's a throwback at heart, but with enough modern sensibilities to not get so stuck in his own lane that he can't make a crash dummy. But here's something I didn't even know until looking into it. But music was never Joey's first love, believe it or not. It was acting, but we don't know that because he took to the ladder like a fish to beer batter. Joey has been in acting school since he was like 14, and said in a Pop Sugar interview that by the time he was 15, he was committed to making acting a career. Matter of fact, music was always just a vehicle to get his acting career off the ground. And now with roles in, Mr. Robot and Grownish and, the Power Universe, among others, he's turned his eye to the rap game and to the throne at the top. Listen, I don't like the Joey is just drumming up publicity for his newest project, because duh, nigga. But why is it okay for an established star like Kendrick to do it, but not a next up who really probably could use the publicity? Or did y'all just conveniently forget that Not Like Us, The Pop Out, and GNX all happened within like 9 months of each other? Like y'all see how goofy that argument is when the shoe is on you? More important to my point, though, Joey is basically taking the Kendrick course and claiming the crown. Again, do we only ever bring up the Control verse, the Dick Ride Dot? I mean, it seems that way, since we barely ever talk about any of the responses besides Big Sean's. Like, come on, dog. I just said that Big K.R.I.T didn't get a response because he didn't come hard enough. But Big Sean? Big Sheezy? Did we all just forget about that BET cipher also? What about all the subliminals that he sent at Drake over like the course of 10 years? What about the fact that his biggest pre-beef single was again a Big Sean diss? Big Sean? Like, I get it. A lot of y'all are new here, but this is what I was talking about in the last John, about getting your learner's permit and deciding to become an Uber driver. Dog, shut the F up and have a seat before you make us all crash out. Like, literally crash the car, dog. You ain't the only one in here. There's kids in the back, man. In writing this script, I thought a lot about past videos I've done on Kendrick, specifically the last Culture War video. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. But I made the argument that both Kenny and Drake exhibited characteristics of Prince. But where I messed up was when I said that Drake always wanted to be Kendrick, without mentioning the fact that Kendrick kind of wanted to be Drake also. Or at least he wanted to be where Drake was until this time last year when he finally got there. While yes, I will always die on the hill that Drake coveted Kenny's accolades, Kenny wanted Drake's notoriety. The Grammy plaques and the Pulitzer Prizes were never enough for him. He wanted the commercial crown as well. Like I always say, two things can be true and sometimes even more are. I still believe that in Kendrick's mind, he was fighting for the soul of the culture, but at the same time, he was fighting for the casual audience as well, because to that point, that was the only thing missing from his GOAT checklist. And that's the part I think that we miss. We, or rather the industry, created the concept of a big three, but Cole was the only one that ever really bought into that. Drake, I think, just stopped carrying around scorpions and kind of went with it because he knew he could never win over the ultra hardcore hip hop old heads, but Kendrick never did buy into that. He said it himself, there's only big me. And before the age of superstars, that's what it was, at least from the time Jay started calling himself the best rapper alive. One ring to rule them all and in the darkness bind them. So all those subs at Drake were just as much a culture war as it was a personal one, is what I'm saying. Like I said in the past, Drake was the most consequential rapper of the past decade, much like Kanye was in the decade before him. In a lot of ways, Kendrick was Wayne to Drake's Kanye, the mainstream alternative to the most popular wave of the time. But Kendrick did what Wayne never could, and that's turned Drake's fans against him, or at least shut them up long enough for his own to dominate the discourse, and thus crown himself the king with no real contenders. At that point, there's nowhere to go but down, and part of me feels like Kendrick knows this. After you've had the kind of year that Kenny has had, where else do you go from here? To Hollywood, obviously. I feel like the further we get from Not Like Us, the more of his attention is going to shift to a new frontier to conquer, leaving space for a hungry up-and-comer to lay claim to his throne. Imagine if that Trey Parker movie is anything like I think it's going to be. Imagine you just don't understand the Super Bowl crowd and the way that they're going to react to their savior basically making a race play movie. I mean, they'll probably, I'm a hypocrite their way out of it, but those of y'all with an actual personal compass, y'all know what I mean, right? I don't know, Kendrick, you might lose your Hotep pass after that, dog. I don't know how many Dr. Sebi books you can buy to recover from that. I could see that as a perfect time for Joey and his 5% adjacency to pounce. Oh yeah, again, Joey knows the deep magic. The nigga is literally from Brooklyn after all. Again, if you really take a step back and look at what's happening, it's eerily similar to Kendrick's come up, but without as much fanfare. Kendrick ran the gauntlet on Control. Joey did the same between the Red Bull Cypher and Crash Dummy. Joey made Illuminati Part 2, and Kendrick spent most of the 2010s firing at the throne, including a diss track that may or may not have been released that was recorded 4 years before Euphoria. Remember that report? The only real difference between Dot and Joey is that the timeline is accelerated this time, but the path is basically the same. So if Joey does plaque this time, or at least charts the way that he has in the past, will he still be too small for Dot? And if yes, then what the F are we actually doing here? And if no, do you really think that he's not prepared for this? Again, only Kendrick can beat another Kendrick. Charisma, Joey's literally an actor. Matter of fact, that's probably where the bulk of his casual stance will come from if a rap war were to ever be waged. Creativity, the nigga basically ended his beef with the entirety of the TDE roster by making another Not Like Us. And he's from New York.
I'll put it like this. Before the battle, you asked me, I'd be like, what are you talking about? After it, I go, I don't know. The way that he masterfully was, because I say this about the Joey battle, I think it's pretty clear, at least to me, that Joey won. And I think when everybody was using that, one of the specific examples I use is when everybody was using that Puff angle against Joey. That was like the main thing that everybody that was dissing him was using. And I remember in real time, I was like, that's like low hanging fruit. It's gonna work because there's gonna be 150 million Puff jokes you can make, and it's always gonna be funny because it's Puff right now. But here's the problem in the battle. You better hope there's no way to rebuttal this, because if your whole castle is built on this and he pulls the foundation out, then there's nothing. So then when he did the rebuttal where he said, you know, he saw the TDE dude there, I went, oh no, that's genius battling. Here's why. Yeah. Because he knew that the whole time. He waited for his last song to say that. Yeah. So he was like, oh, keep going, keep high. So that's where I go, okay, so he is strategist. And you got to also take into consideration, he was battling a lot of people. A lot of people. Like when Drake says he was a 20v1, it was really like 1.5 v1, because like the 20v1 is people, like he was throwing people in there like The Weeknd. Right. And stuff like that. Like nobody was expecting, that's not really a real 20v1.
And like Metro
really just wanted to see, you versus Kendrick. But here with that battle, we kind of wanted to see him respond to everything that people were saying, and he did. So though I feel like the masses wouldn't allow Joey to have a win, the heads that know, if it even looks like he nicked him a little bit, people are going to super amplify that.
Again, we grossly underestimate Joey's aura. Look at how many diss tracks sprung up out of that beef, and not just between Joey and insert TDE alumnus here, but the extended Joey v everybody universe. I can't be the only one who was getting suggestions for random East and West Coast rappers creating their own little pocket diss track universes off the back of their shared tangential connections to that beat. Like, Joey Badass is the reason we got Loaded Lux versus Daylight. Joey Badass is the reason most casual hip-hop heads now even know who Daylight is, let alone, you know, Rayvon and AZ Chike, and you can go down the list. But most of all, Joey made the whole King of New York thing matter for the first time since at least Pop Smoke. And to be honest, probably earlier, like 50 Cent earlier. For as much as Atlanta has become the Mecca, New York is still Medina, or really it should be the other way around. Yep. Well, I'm not a Muslim. Forgive me. It is still where hip hop was born and raised, is what I'm saying. It's where many of the GOATs were born and raised. Nas, Rakim, LL, Jay-Z, Biggie, Big L, and of course Ice Spice. It's still home to some of hip-hop's most prominent gatekeepers in Hot 97 and Power 105. And also, it's literally the biggest media market in the country. Like seriously, though, it ain't that hard to figure out.
Well, if Joey gets a hit in a TikTok sound, like think about Jid. Like right now, we're waiting. Even though I've always loved Jid, we're waiting for Jid in a way we hadn't before.
Surround
Forever Story and a TikTok trend, which happened like a year after Forever Story. And after Forever Story, the TikTok trend, I'm expecting Jid to hit us with, okay, it's me and Kendrick now. It's the big two. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see. We'll see.
When's the last time that the New York Tri-State had a marquee-worthy MC using boom bap as their vehicle? 50 maybe? So let's go to the scorecard, Clarence. This video is already taking long enough, so I'm going to make this simple and give Joey. I guess I'll give him a 7 in clout, 7.5 in consciousness, and a 7.5 in creativity. That's probably his weakest area, because I don't know, man. He sounds like a boom bap rapper, which I mean is not inherently a bad thing. It's just that I've never heard a Joey Badass song that told the story the way that Kendrick, Cole, K.R.I.T, or even J-Elect have, or even noname, or even Lupe, or maybe even The Game. Like, I'm gonna stop talking before I talk myself out of this score. Like, I know some of y'all are going to say like me, but I'm gonna be real. I didn't really understand the narrative behind that track until I saw the video. Like, I got the themes, but I didn't get the story, and that's not good storytelling. It's just not. I'm sorry. I don't know. Maybe there's other tracks that I haven't listened to, but again, this stays at a 7.5 at best for me, boss. Even with all of that said, I still kind of think that Kenny would edge him out in most scenarios, but I don't think it'll be the gentleman's sweep that was Drake or what people are trying to predict. At worst, it'll be like a 6-game series. And again, if we're going to use the South has something to say argument for Jid or K.R.I.T, how much more do you think that'll be magnified by the Mecca, the real Mecca, New York? New York niggas have been begging on bended butters for somebody to believe in for the last 20 years. Joey is that. All I'm saying is Joey is one hot album away from dead in the hole, not big enough bit for good. And I'm not going to lie, I kind of want that for him. But not just for him, I want it for me. I want it for hip-hop. And that's really what this whole video gets down to, man. The purpose of this joint isn't really to prove Kendrick can be beaten, because I'm dull, nigga. Like, I really hope y'all are not taking these scores to heart, but really it's to get y'all to fall in love with hip-hop and not just with hip-hop artists. Yeah, it's great if Kenny was your gateway, but there's a plethora of other artists that deserve your attention that are not dissimilar from him. It reminds me of a video that the homie Tariq did a while ago on 2D animation. It's on us, the consumer, to tell everyone we know that quality is out there, because we sure as shuckle can't depend on the same studios that put these Jones out on the same weekend as the newest Marvel movie to do so. But you can't spread the word about something or somebody you don't know about.
A thing that I always tell my community, and I try to push in a lot of my content, is the idea of telling people to touch rap grass. Because I think a lot of people think they know a lot and they don't know nothing. And it's easy to think you know a lot because a lot of people's consumption is really linked into the promotional machines, mostly controlled by Universal Records. Like, right. I think if people really looked at their music listening habits and they took the, Universal and Warner out of the picture and look at what they were left with, they'd be very shocked. Like, a lot of people take the marketing for the boundaries of reality. The people who know have to be able to reflect that reality back to people easier. Like, why are you even talking to me? You don't know anything. Like that was the conversation I was trying to have with the dude in the bar. Right. I still don't know how to word it exactly yet, but it's just to me, it's always about asking questions, right? Like why would there be a big three? A big three of what? When Complex puts out the best 50 rappers in LA list, the best 50 rappers at what? Like, these people, they sit around in these offices and they make these lists. I don't even know how long it takes for them to do it, but they put it out and it makes everybody angry, and it starts fucking divisions between people, and it's just craziness. It's craziness. But I think people just have to start being very aware of how the music that they enjoy has come to them. Be very aware of where their own opinions come from sometimes.
Like, think about Sinners and how for the first week that movie was out, we kept seeing headlines about how much of a box office bomb it was bound to be. Before all of our friends and family wouldn't shut up about, the church boy eating hot, sweaty hoochie coochie in between selections in his set. Which kind of sounds like Vacation Bible School, to be honest, or a regular Sunday morning in my house. That's what I'm talking about. Nothing that I've said should take away from Kendrick as an artist. Like I said, he might be the greatest songwriter in hip-hop history, but you wouldn't know that if he didn't have the right people behind him steering the ship and keeping his public persona palatable enough to please a mainstream audience. There's so many things that had to fall in place for Kendrick to become Kendrick outside of his own artistry. And there's a wake of people who at one point were considered, if not his peer, his superiors even. But here we are 10 years later, and I have niggas with Avatar Kyoshi as their profile pic trying to rewrite history of a genre that they just started paying attention to within the last half decade. Jesus Christ, somebody got to be done about these people, man. I hate the talking point that rap beef is just publicity with more steps, because again, duh and nigga. The fact that so many of y'all hadn't heard of Joey Badass until he called out Kendrick really says more about us, the culture, than it does about Joey. It says that, again, most of us aren't nearly as tapped in as we would like to believe. We move as the machine tells us to, because like I keep saying, the music industry does not sell music. It sells personalities, just like the NBA. And just because your favorite personality so happens to be a little more woke than your neighbor's favorite doesn't make you any less susceptible to marketing and thereby capitalism. All right, this ain't really that video. So again, Joey is not a nobody, and it's not like he hasn't made any music since 2012. It's just that he's inconsistent, and the fact that our favorite artists are a search engine away means we aren't really incentivized to seek out new music when it's not being shoved in our face. I've been guilty of this myself more times than I'd like to admit. Really, it's y'all that have to put me onto bands and singers that I've never heard of, all the while I'm moaning and groaning about how there's no more singers in R&B or decent punk bands to listen to, and bravo, kudos to y'all for that. That said, there still aren't nearly as many as when I was a kid, and even the ones that are out, they don't get nearly as much shine at the side chick singers, but that's not my point. I don't know, man. I personally feel like if the first time you heard of Joey Badass or Daylight or Ray Vaughn or anybody else involved in that beef, and it was because of that beef, then maybe instead of saying that they're too small, we should be making them bigger. I don't know. Maybe we should be looking into their back catalogs and finding out why they feel like they have a dog in this fight to begin with, you know? Maybe we need to stop trying to be the smartest mark in the room and just enjoy the show like we did the first time we saw a nigga get thrown off of a steel cage through a plywood table. What I'm saying is, a lot of folk don't love hip-hop. They love celebrities. Ironic considering that was kind of the point of letting the party die, right? Or maybe it was just one big elaborate album rollout, kind of like what Joey is doing now. Checkmate, nigga. But jokes aside, part of the reason for making this video was to introduce y'all to some other Kendrick adjacent artists who aren't Kendrick himself. So, you know, Godspeed and good luck, dog. And also stop the dick licking. I'm tired of seeing that.